Good evening, everyone. And before we start, just make sure you shut your phones and electronics off. We don't go off during our meeting. So this time I'll call City Council meeting to order. And if we can rise, if you're able, to hear the national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
This time I'd like to read our land acknowledgement. Niagara region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The City of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Council, we have three proclamations this evening. 4.1 is Fire Prevention Week from October the 9th to the 15th of 2022. 4.2 is Small Business Week from October the 16th to the 22nd of 2022. And Poppy Weeks from October the 28th to November 11th of 2022. If I could have Councillors Danch and Bruno move that. Are there any questions? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. If I could have Councillors Wells and Bodner move the agenda. Are there any questions to this evening's agenda or changes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. At this time, I don't have any disclosures of interest, but I ask again, are there any? None? We have one set of minutes, the regular meeting of Council, September 13th, 2022. If I could have Councillor Kalaleff and Bagu move that. Questions on those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. At this time, we have the following items pulled for separate discussion. 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.7, 9.1, 9.2. I'm going to ask that 9.6 be pulled and 9.9. For the remainder of the items, can I have Councillors Beauregard and Danch move those? And there are no questions. All in favor? That's carried. And at this time, I'll go to the podium for our presentation. So it's great to see everybody here this evening. It's good to, after the pandemic, to have people back here and we can do a lot of our traditions that we're missing over the last couple of years. And back almost 100 years ago, starting in 1927, marathon swimming was a huge deal. Swimmers from around the world came to the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto to compete in the Professional Swim Championship of the World. It was a distance of 34 kilometers, or for those that didn't do metric, 21 miles. In the 4 times he participated, between 1927, when he was just 15 years old, and 1933, when he was 21, Isidore Sponder of Port Colborne finished in the top 3. He was a hero like Bobby Orr of his time, or for you younger people, Sidney Crosby. Mr. Sponder died in December of 1986 at the age of 74. In 1993, his family paid for a pool lift for handicapped swimmers at the Centennial Pool and dedicated it to the people of Port Colborne. When Centennial was decommissioned and the new pool opened at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, the Sponder family wanted to ensure Isidore's memory lived on. In 2017, the city established the Isidore Sponder Memorial Trophy, awarded to a member of the Port Colborne swim team, the Piranhas, who best reflected Mr. Sponder's qualities, a competitive spirit, dedicated to the sport, and always giving 110%, win or lose. So on behalf of City Council and the citizens of Port Colborne, I'm proud to introduce the recipient of the 2022 Isidore Sponder Memorial Trophy, Summer McCaffrey. You want to come up, Summer? Yeah, come on up. So you want to just stand here for a second. So Summer is age 13 and was chosen as the recipient of the Isidore Sponder Award this year for all those qualities and for her kind and caring attitude. Summer always cheered on her teammates and was thankful to receive the ribbons for which she trained so hard. She often came swimming outside of practice time to improve her endurance. She is applauded for all her efforts. Congratulations, Summer, on this award. And in 2022, the team was small with only 23 Piranhas, but have had as many as 35 swimmers other years. And Piranhas meet on Tuesday and Friday nights at the Valley Health and Wellness Center for practices in July and August, and have swim meets on Saturday mornings throughout the Niagara region. And most municipalities in Niagara support a swim team. So we'll stop at that point. So what we have here is, this is the trophy, the Isidore Sponder Memorial Trophy that stays at the Valley Health and Wellness Center. So if we can present that to you at this time. And we also have a plaque presented to Summer McCaffrey, recipient of the City of Port Colborne Isidore Sponder Memorial Trophy for 2022, recognizing your competitive spirit and dedication to the sport of swimming. We want to just step forward. We'll get our CAO to take a photograph of this. Anybody else? So I'll take that one back. This is yours. Do you want to see it in it? No. So you just stay right here for a second, okay? We're going to have you just stay right here. So Port Colborne has been the winner of the regional swim meet for quite a few years. In fact, this year, Port Colborne won all of its regular season meets and the regional meet, where the Piranhas competed against all of the other municipalities. We have Coach Jennifer Lohr, who began coaching the Piranhas 30 years ago at Centennial Pool after swimming on the Port Colborne team herself. Due to a love of the water and competitive spirits, the coaching staff has grown to include her sister, a pair of twin sisters, and another former swimmer, all of whom worked hard as instructors at Centennial Pool and all of whom have children on the team. As well, Jennifer's daughter, Emma, who has now surpassed the summer team, competed in swimming events at OFSA for Port Colborne High School and has joined the Piranha staff. Seeing former Piranhas come back to volunteer or coach is rewarding to all the coaches. So if we could ask Jennifer to come up. And this, we had to go to Beamsville, tackle them, and get it out from under their hands because they just did not want to give it up, believe me. So Gail Todd, the EA for Scott and I, went down on Friday and made sure that this was here this evening. So this time, if I could present this trophy to Jennifer, because Jennifer, you guys get to actually keep this for a year. But we'll be a little bit better next year because we're going to keep it here because we're going to win again. Thank you. Come on, just short and sweet, that's all.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the Port Colborne city staff who support our swim team. We are very lucky to be supported. Even though we swim out of the valet, that we've remained a city program. And congratulations to all of our swimmers, Summer and her sister Sierra, another fantastic award winner this year. Congratulations, girls.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, you guys can sit down. You can sit down. Yeah. So, the trophy that we have here that stays at the Valley Health Wellness Center has Summer's name engraved on it. Obviously, Summer gets to keep her plaque, which is a good thing. But just a few other things here. Guests here to celebrate Summer's achievement include obviously her coach Jennifer Lohr, her parents, Fred Horvath, and an Isidore Sponder relative. So we thank everybody for attending on this, and it's great. As I said, it's great to have people back here at council for the city council to do these awards, and I think it speaks and bodes well for the city of Port Colborne on our great sporting teams we have here. And swimming is just another example of winning tradition here at the city of Port Colborne. So Piranhas, congratulations and thank you. So at this time, we have one delegation this evening, the region of Niagara with regards to transit. We have Robert Salowich that's here this evening. So Robert, do you want to come on?
Great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate Council, CAO, welcoming me back to the chambers to give a little bit of an update. I know it's been a couple of months, and a lot's been changing on the transit front, as you may or may not be aware. So we will go ahead and go through a presentation, try and keep it as short and sweet for you as possible, but I do just want to highlight that this is going to be the highs and lows of NRT on demand. So we try not to shy away from too much at the region, maybe to our own detriment, but we'll see how it goes just the same. So if we, let's see. Perfect. So we had a really strong start. Over the summer, we saw pretty significant gains. The program as a whole seems to take a little while to get going in every community that it starts. You know, it usually takes 8 to 12 months at sort of a bare minimum before we start to see the numbers that we expect. So as this program started just in January in Port Colborne, we don't think we're even at the point where we've seen the maximum number of daily trips for the city yet. But just to give you an idea, we had a 35% increase in the summer, and then we just jumped from that 736 number to 946 as of August and September as well. So we have continued to see the increases that we're talking about. I know that we do send out some statistics every month, so I'm sure that you have a chance to take a look at those. And on those ratings, or on those statistics, are a set of ratings. And you know, those ratings can be a little bit viewed with a little bit of skepticism, only because they are taken from people that use the app. However, roughly 80% of our riders are using the app. So it at least gives you a fair estimate. And what we see is that 92% roughly of all of the trips that are taken get rated a 5-star. So we have very, very low percentage of people whose trips didn't go the way that they expected. Certainly not to say that that doesn't happen and that there are plenty of examples of those. But just to give a further piece, 95% of all of the rated wheelchair accessible vehicle trips are rated 5-star as well. So it's an even higher benchmark that we seem to hit with that. And I think that it just goes to show that there was a level of accessibility that wasn't available prior, at least in terms of getting around the city to places that weren't on the previous bus route. Port Colborne has a highest percentage of wheelchair accessible trips among the smaller municipalities. So for whatever reason that disparity seems to occur, we're making sure that all those riders are still getting the trips that they are looking for. As I mentioned, we have roughly 80% of the trips being booked through the app. And so that is 90% across the entire system. So in Port Colborne, we do see a higher percentage of people that are utilizing the telephone line to call in and book trips. But we also find that that tends to change over time as well. The more comfortable people get with the system, they inevitably end up trying the app because of the additional features there. And that's typically how we see that trend going. This map is a little bit fuzzy on my screen. It's a little fuzzy on your screen too. But it is just meant to show the breakdown of where trips or where riders are going in Port Colborne. So as you can see there, the gray line that's overlaid is the previous bus route as well as the existing route 22 and 25. So what this does show, especially the map on the right-hand side, you can see that there's quite a significant amount of ridership being requested that are outside of the urban area. And so significant increases to those areas has been happening over the last couple of months. I had a previous slide up where we ended up taking it down because it didn't look as nice as this one, and then we updated the data. And what it basically shows is month after month, we continue to see the growth. And as people find out about it, they tell other people, and that the word of mouth is really where is the agent of growth for this service. Okay, in terms of connecting to our neighbors, where are the residents of Port Colborne going? And so as you can see on the leftmost chart, it's pretty much coming or going to Wainfleet. That's the #1 location that people are going. Now this is on NRT On Demand, so it doesn't take into account people who are still using the Port Colborne Link route to go into Welland. This is only for those that are using the service to go to a different municipality. And conversely, Port Colborne is the highest destination point for Wainfleet as well. So whatever services they're not providing to their residents, they certainly appreciate that Port Colborne is providing because they're definitely coming in to make use of them. All right, and as I touched on, there was going to be some things that maybe aren't the best news. Okay, so things that we heard that weren't really that good. We heard originally that there were some pre-booked trips that had been canceled, and then it was saying that there was no ability to rebook. This ended up just being something that we needed to work out as a process internally, and once we were able to fix that, we started just to manually redirect all of those trips, and the issue went away. So it was a matter of a process that, for whatever reason, seemed to work well in all of the other municipalities, and when we brought it to Port Colborne, it needed an update, and so one was made. We've heard that there are long wait times, 40 plus minutes, certainly during the hours of 3 to 5 p.m. I think that is common across all municipalities. It's the busiest time of day. Anybody that's ever looked at a traffic study knows that the afternoon peak is going to be the biggest. And really what it is people are just trying to get home from work, trying to get home from appointments, all sorts of things. That time of day is when people try and get out. So the second one, or the third one, is really tied to the second one. It was about not receiving any trips that were available in the service. And really, this is tied very much to specific times of the day where all municipalities see a level of service. We can't possibly meet all of the demand for every trip at every moment in time. And so really the goal is to try and keep the number of vehicle unavailable messages down in the 1% to 5% range, which typically we do. We did have some comments regarding some challenges, some booking challenges for riders that either didn't have an email or a phone number, but we've worked out some additional processes to help use some generic information in those cases where that's the case. But to the same extent, also, there is a level of expectation that goes back on the rider that if they don't have those things, let's say a free email address, that there are public services in the town that the city already pays for that can help them. So as an example, the library maintains open access for computers. You know, Gmail and its associated email accounts are free. So really from that perspective, there isn't a reason why we can't assist people in making sure that they get that information in order to be able to use the service. We do have and have had some challenges with verbal communications with some of the customer service representatives. So when we launched this program, the customer service base is out of Manila, so it's in the Philippines. And that is because it's part of VIA's global system. Now, There are agents that we have out of Salt Lake City that provide overflow care. So during the peak times of the day when residents are most likely to call in, we do have residents from North America answering those calls. And also I think it's worth adding, even though it comes up later, is that this was always meant as a temporary solution. So when NRT On Demand started 2.5 years ago, I guess 3 years ago now, it was intended that this program would be reviewed and sought to be brought in-house where at all possible. Because we had such a short runway in order to get started, things like buying the vehicles, having an internal customer service staff, all of those things weren't feasible from a regional budget perspective, but it was possible to operationalize those costs and put them into the budget for a couple of years under the guise of a pilot. So part of what will happen, and again, I'll touch on it later for the new transit commission that's coming, is it will be up to them to review both specialized transit and NRT On Demand to find out how to best make sure that those programs continue to run in a way that's cost effective for the residents, yet still meeting the needs of the community. Go back one. I'll skip a couple here, but I do want to highlight one that was maybe causing some excess excitement about vans running out of fuel and gas cars not being acceptable or for use in Port Colborne. This is unfortunately just one of those cases where a new staff member, a new driver specifically, missed a number of notices regarding the processes that they're supposed to follow. So at no time were vehicles not permitted to gas up in Port Colborne. We've always had an arrangement for the Sunoco that's just downtown. And there's always processes for that driver to answer and get help. Now, in that particular circumstance, they did none of the things that we would typically hope that they would do. And as a result, and Councillor Danch can verify, they ended up having people in his establishment asking about, where is their vehicle coming, why it's not there. They were quite frustrated, certainly because of the number of things that sort of fell down. But again, I think it's important to recognize that's not an example of a systemic issue. It's a matter of one particular issue that really went wrong in a couple of ways, with that person not even having access, I guess, to the information that or maybe not thinking they had access to the information that they did have access to, which caused the concern. So as I mentioned, and I think on the other slide I said it was 3 to 5, but it does sort of fluctuate from month to month. And so really this slide is just sort of intended to show you the breakdown of the different types of requests that we get for trips. So the line at the top, the tallest line, is really the number of trips that we complete in any given day. So you can see that it's by far the largest margin. And if you look to see this very, very small one down here that's kind of gray, that is barely off of 0, that's the number of trips that we cancel. So you may hear about circumstances where somebody's pre-booked trip was canceled and we had to reroute or we had to rebook them. Those are all accounted for under those. So it's very minimal when you're looking at a percentage base out of the total number of requests that we get. But we do recognize that breaking it down into a statistic still means that there was somebody who was left, or had to wait or didn't get their ride or whatever it may be. So it does translate into real world issues, but at the same time, again, we wanted to highlight that it's not something that's systemic, and rather it's something that just happens during specific instances or certain times of the day. And it's probably also worth mentioning that the late cancellation and the no-show lines are the two in the middle that are significantly higher than the one. So as cheeky as it may sound, the number of times that residents are canceling on us vastly outweighs the number of times that we're canceling on a resident. And so, that's the way services tend to work, but we certainly wanted to just point out the fact that it does in fact go both ways. This one just highlights a little bit about the average wait times. We wanted to highlight for you that in general, wait times tend to fluctuate between about 20 and 30 minutes, and it does a little bit depend on the time of the day, but it doesn't really depend on where the trips are being taken. So in this particular slide, the one on the left, is all trips that both started and ended in Port Colborne. So it was a local trip in the city. The middle one is trips that started in Port Colborne. So it could be a local trip, but it could also be a trip that was leaving Port Colborne. And the last one is all trips involving Port Colborne, any which way that the city was involved. And as you can see, for the most part, it doesn't really deviate from that average. And all that goes to show you is we're not prioritizing residents who are trying to leave the city because we're Niagara region and we deliver regional trips. There's no prioritization at all, and that's in line with Ontario legislation that basically it's a first come, first serve service. This one is just to show a little bit of proportionality. So since the service started in Port Colborne, we've had 701 times that somebody has tried to get a trip and been told that the service wasn't available during that time. And that sounds like a lot because, it just does. But proportionally, Grimsby has seen 4,547 during that same time period. So we didn't even go back to the previous years to, build up the fact that Grimsby's had the service 2 years. It's just a matter of proportionally, everybody's going to get that message sooner or later. Sometimes there aren't rides available during the busy times of the day. We do whatever we can to try and recommend people that they use the service in the morning, typically 9:30 between and noon, to get the best value in terms of low wait times, ease of access, that sort of thing. All right. This one is just a little bit to show, again, how well Port Colborne has done through January through September. It does show, again, a little bit of proportionality with respect to some of the neighbors. But again, a lot of those municipalities have had the service for a number of months, in some cases years. For example, Niagara-on-the-Lake has an awful lot of trips there in the middle, but they also pay specifically for 4 vehicles to stay within their town's boundaries. So it's a different setup. And so while we put all the information here for you to compare, it's not really an apples to apples kind of comparison. It's more just there so you can get a sense of just how many people are traveling, and then what sort of the breakdown is as well. Is it, are we canceling a lot of trips? Are people canceling trips on us? This one is, again, really just to try and show you where Port Colborne fits in within the larger scheme of trips that are being requested and completed. And as you can see, it's right in around 6%. But if you recall as well, at the first slide, the number of wheelchair accessible vehicle trips that were happening was 14. So you're really sort of double the average in terms of wheelchair accessible requests in your community. All right, so some of the changes that we've made. We've done a number of things since implementing the service. The first thing is that we changed some of the locations that vehicles were laying by or waiting for passengers to be picked up. Basically, we ended up cutting a nice path through the middle of the region and now keeping vehicles more in the northwest towards Grimsby and more in the southeast. So we're sort of using Port Colborne as a de facto hub to try and service Wainfleet and sort of the south half of Pelham and driving trips into Welland as well, where they are authorized. We did, as I think I mentioned earlier, when we solved the issue with the pre-booking, it was really just a matter of needing to revise our process so that we were manually redistributing any trips that had been canceled, whereas before it should have been done automatically. We were finding that it wasn't happening, and we've now gone back through and redone that process. So it is, in fact, happening automatically by the system with the project manager for our service provider verifying overnight to make sure that it is in fact doing what it's supposed to do each day. We have done a number of retraining processes for agents for booking and rebooking. Again, part of the issues with having an off-site customer service center is that they seem a little slow to pick up on some of the changes. So that'll be one of the pieces that when we're making our recommendation to the Niagara Transit Commission is that they be aware of some of the limitations of using an external customer service center. We've revised the messages regarding the fueling of the vehicles. Oh, not sure why it didn't go back. Just give me a second here. Thank you very much. We added support from North American-based agents during the peak time. I mentioned that well as ready. And VIA has started conducting some additional analysis of their drivers themselves to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to be doing that, and that there aren't anything else going on where they're not taking rides when maybe they should be. A few other things specific to Port Colborne is when we started, we wanted the program to have more of a program ambassador feel so that staff at the city were empowered to answer questions for people who were coming in. But we think that that plan didn't work as well as we had thought. Some of the questions that were coming in were a little too specific. And really what it ended up being is it's better to simply redirect those people back into regional staff or to the service provider themselves, which I think most councillors here are aware that people have a tendency to reach out to you first as opposed to the service provider or to us at the region when something doesn't go as intended. So. We did make some additional software changes that are coming. They should start, I am hoping, as early as tomorrow, which will help us keep some vehicles down in the south. So I mentioned we cut a nice swath where we were allowing vehicles to stand, and we're no longer allowing them to stand sort of in the middle of the municipality. It's not really working as well as we thought to keep things efficient. So trying to spread them a little more. And I think this latest one, and we'll see in the future months, but will have some impacts to reducing wait times in Port Colborne, just because we'll be keeping vehicles a little more tightly connected to port as opposed to letting them travel elsewhere. Okay, and service-wide improvements. This is really things that are coming between now and the end of this year, mostly, with a little bit into 2023. So, WCAG 2.1 accessibility, that's online accessibility. Right now, the world has to be 2.0, and we're this close to being 2.1. We just have one little piece that's getting the best of us. But by the middle of this month, from what I've heard, we'll be full 2.1 criteria, which puts us ahead of the game in terms of where we're supposed to be at least. We've revised the booking process, and that will continue to happen. So anybody who is using the service might see some minor changes to wording. Really, we're just trying to streamline the booking flow so it makes a little more sense when people are booking and they don't have to look around for some of the options like how do I schedule a trip. You know, there's an icon there, it says schedule. Most people seem to miss that it's right there. So we're working on some ways to try and maybe call attention to things a little bit differently. This one actually already happened just last week. So an arrive-by feature went in, as opposed to just telling what time you want to leave. You now have the option of saying what time you want to arrive by, and the system will do a work back and tell you what time you then need to be ready. So this was always something that we had expected. VIA was long, really long in developing it for us, but it's there now, and it's right where it should be, frankly. We're developing a web portal for booking, so there's been some requests from some of the municipalities, Port Colborne included, that although residents can call and although residents can use the app, there's still a segment of the population that would prefer to still use a computer to book, but not using an app. So there is a web portal being developed with VIA. Again, unfortunately, late 2022 is the best you're going to get in terms of dates out of me, which is why they're all titled that, because they're essentially out of my control, and we're waiting for VIA to fulfill their obligations on those fronts. Streamline the booking process. I mentioned that one's going to be an ongoing process. That's why it's late 2022 and early 2023. The next one's quite a big change and isn't specific to NRT On Demand, but all of transit is adding a different payment technology onto the vehicles, in part and parcel with the transit app and a company named Masabi. So over the next year, everything from mobile ticketing to account-based ticketing to open payment to allowing people to pay with Google and Apple Pay on their phones, all of those things are coming to transit over the next year. We don't know exactly what is coming at what date so far, but mobile ticketing will be very, very early in 2023, with the other things having a few regulationary hurdles to jump through first. Integration with the transit app. So transit app, if anyone recalls, is it's really a global piece of software that has all transit routes from any transit agency in the world that uploads their data to Google. They use the same API to pull that information. So what that means is all of Niagara is on there. So riders can do all of their route planning through the transit app. What this integration does is allows riders to now or then make payments and book their rides for any service in Niagara, whether that's NST, NRT On Demand, Fort Erie On Demand, you know, whatever it might be, all through the transit app. So the transit app sort of becomes the de facto face of transit in Niagara, and everything in the background just programs to go to the specific area or the specific service. But from the rider's perspective, they'll pay that one fee and should be able to do everything through one app where so they want to use the app, and of course they can continue to call us on the phone if they have questions about, doing that sort of thing. Okay, and the very last piece is just the service review for early to mid 2023. I touched on that earlier in just saying that the new Niagara Transit Commission will be responsible for reviewing all the existing services and deciding how to best run them going forward, where they can be merged, where they need to be expanded. That's all part of that service review. Should happen early on next year, with a decision likely to go out to some sort of competitive procurement process for a variety of services, not just energy on demand, to start for January of 2024. So when things switch over here in January to the new Niagara Transit Commission, there won't be interruptions for residents. The link route will continue to run, energy on demand will continue to run. There's no changing of service providers or anything like that that's happening during that time. But there are some things that are a little bit specific to the Transit Commission that I wanted to highlight, just because I don't think you're going to get Matt Robinson back in the room before the end of the year. So in lieu of him, you're going to get my one-page update instead. So the fare alignment and technology harmonization, and I touched on this already. This was the piece that I just mentioned about having the new fares, the new fare technology, but there will also be some alignment of fares. So right now, if you go to St. Catharines and you go to Niagara Falls and you go to Welland, they all have slightly different fares, right? And if you get on a link route, that's a different fare, and if you go on this local route, that's a different fare. All of that's going away in January. There will continue to be the same two-tier structure that we have now, where it's $3 for a local trip and $6 for a regional trip. Really, what we're doing is just making sure all the municipalities are playing nicely, that the fares all align, and that from a rider's perspective, you don't have to guess how much you pay from one place to another. It's the same in every city. It's the same getting to every city. You can use the same pass in every city. So these are all the things that have sort of been, maybe a long time coming in Niagara, but the alignment and harmonization of services allows us to make those changes. The provision of Sunday and holiday service has been a long-standing item for the region. It's actually been in our budget for over a year, but COVID has thrown a number of wrenches into a number of plans for a lot of good people. So this one unfortunately fell off for us, and it's just a matter of trying to align staffing availability and staff training. And really where things stand now is we're looking at earliest 2023, 2024 before that actually starts. Best case scenario, I think, would be September, but don't hold me to that. We also have the potential for additional and or larger vehicles on NRT on demand. So part of that review I mentioned for the NTC to do, to review NRT on demand and see how the service is doing, is to look at the vehicle mix that we currently use, which is basically all minivans, as you probably know, and trying to determine if that's the right mix going forward. There's actually a lot of data based on how few times a vehicle is filled that we would be better off using smaller, more efficient vehicles as opposed to using larger vehicles to try and cram more people onto those vehicles. So, I know that's a little bit at odds with what we do on the fixed route transit service, where we try and do, in fact, the exact opposite. The potential service mergers. This is 2024, but it is right in line with what I said. There's a whole bunch of different services across Niagara, all currently being provided by a number of service providers, whether they're private or whether they're public. There's probably 14 of them by the time you add them all up. To some degree, those are all going to have to be aligned. Now, they are, of course, all aligning under the NTC's banner, but we can do a lot better in terms of service efficiency and capacity, and those changes will take some time to make once the NTC actually has some staff employed and they can start to look at those things, but that'll be part of the review for next year. And really what we expect is that there will be some way to merge the different types of specialized services, at least, because there's basically one in every town already, and at least we should be merging the on-demand services. The two types of services may not merge. That's part of what needs to be looked at. If it does, the service level and the level of accessibility will come up to meet NST, not come down to meet NRT on demand. So just in case there was any concerns about that. And then lastly, that same sort of piece about the mergers, but is sort of the next step, is that a lot of those services, or some of those services, may in fact come in-house. So they may be delivered by regional staff, or I guess at that time commission staff that are part of the transit union, whereas right now it's a mixed bag. We have mostly transit operators are unionized, and we have, for some of our private services, we use contracted or private employees. And again, I think there's a use case for each, but by far and large, we're looking to keep working with the union as much as we have, and if not more, and trying to put a lot more service hours on the road in Niagara. So I know I went over my 10 minutes. I appreciate the flexibility in not saying anything as I just sailed right on by. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
Yeah, no problem, Rob, and thank you for your presentation this evening. But even more, we really want to thank you and the other transit staff that have worked with our staff here, especially in the transition from the system that we had before with a very small route in Port Colborne. And I think the one map showed that 100% of Port Colborne is now covered for transit, which is great, and it's something that we looked at 20 years ago when we started talking about transit. We were able to do a small route, and then now we get to cover the whole city. So I think it bodes well for City of Port Colborne staff, but also for you guys in getting that changeover done as smoothly as possible. We always know there's the odd glitch, but in essence, people are very happy with the system, and it is working. And you can see that by the number of people that are using it. Questions? Mark? Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. This whole system, is it a self-sustaining entity, or is it being subsidized by others?
Through you, Mayor. Subsidized by others in what way?
As in Niagara Region tax dollars?
Yeah, this is public transit. So absolutely the same way that every other element of transit in Niagara is subsidized by the taxpayer, so is this.
Yeah. Do you know what proportion it's being subsidized by?
I don't have the number
Yeah.
for the current year, but last year, I think it was roughly an 85% subsidy,
Yeah.
which is right in line with what we subsidize for Niagara Specialized Transit, except I think Niagara Specialized is actually a 90% subsidy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. One more question, Mr. Mayor, or a comment. The 2023 budget is coming forward, every municipality plus the region. I do have concerns that speculation is it's going to be very low new things being budgeted by region plus the other municipalities. So I'm just concerned about the cost going up. Like $3 and $6, you can't beat it. Like you could go to Thorold for or Niagara Falls for a cup of wonton soup and come back and for $6. I'd go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
Great, thank you. Councillor Beauregard?
Through your worship, to the presenter, I'm just wondering, you discussed that there's potential enhancements to the fleets. Just wondering, is there going to be any, is there any discussion on electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles at all?
Through you, Mayor. So there is really that's a larger program being adopted by the Niagara Transit Commission, though. So when we go through that review next year, absolutely, electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, really all the gamut will be looked at. But whether or not we go ahead with that, it will more so depend on whether or not the commission has any sort of sense on what it wants to do for different types of vehicles. So I know, just as an example, St. Catharines had received some funding just prior to the announcement of amalgamation that was going to review the electrification, and those funds, I believe, are being uploaded to Niagara Region or to the commission specifically to allow them to do that same type of study. So I would say it's a bit premature for me to say that it would be coming, but certainly it's within the scope of what we'll be looking at.
Councillor?
Yeah. And would they be looking at potential funding from maybe the federal government? I know the provincial government may not be so keen on funding these type of vehicles, but maybe the federal government would?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, there's actually a number of different grant programs that are available to transit, and so we continue to utilize them in a variety of programs. Right now, the current one that they have is the ICIT program, which is the Infrastructure Canada. And really what that is designed to do is help catch up for a lot of years of underinvestment from municipalities. And what you can apply for, there's a whole stream that includes accessibility, there's a whole stream that includes enhanced services, and there's a whole stream that also includes providing future types of vehicles in terms of propulsion, at least.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the excellent presentation. One of the things I wanted to ask is, you talked about arrive-by, you talked about integration, and I'm wondering if Niagara Transit is working, I guess through Matt, on the ultimate integration with GO Transit. And so will there be, arrive-by, like how do I get the GO bus in Grimsby or the train when it comes? And are they going to try and align, again, payment, booking, et cetera, et cetera?
Through you, Mayor, that's the million-dollar question about GO. So what I would say is that we will continue to keep our lines of discussion open with the province in terms of integration with the Presto system. Based on our initial conversations, they didn't think it was a good idea, they being the province, think it was a good idea for us to go with Presto because there was a number of changes that they were undergoing. And so under our current, we will not be integrated directly with Presto, but really in all of these different software packages, it's just a matter of paying for the development to integrate them. So I certainly think that it's possible, but I think that there are larger things coming to Niagara in terms of our fare payment technology that will then force us into alignment with the province at maybe a later date.
Just one last on GO. I mean, one of the things certainly caught my interest through the time is, if Niagara Region wanted GO, Niagara had some responsibility to get people to GO.
Yep.
And I believe that's true, and I believe the steps that were taken were necessary to give, I would think, the provincial government the sense that Niagara was ready and Niagara could provide a feeder route and passengers to that to warrant their investment. So are there like pro formas or any type of vision as to how that's going to work? In other words, GO's expectation of Niagara Transit and vice versa.
Yeah, this is actually, sorry, through you, Mayor, this has actually been a program that's been in development for a number of years, as you may or may not know. And so in order to even get the types of agreements that we've gotten done recently with the province and with the stations in Niagara Falls and in St. Catharines, Grimsby's still under work and Pelham's or Lincoln, is on the way. But in all of those circumstances, we had to prove ourselves to the province. And so really what this has been a 4-year push to try and show the province that Niagara is in fact ready for daily GO train service. And one of the major barriers to that was the fact that transit in Niagara wasn't amalgamated, and it was 9 or 10 different agencies all doing their own thing. We could never seem to get everything quite aligned. Now we do have alignment. Things like fares are being aligned. We already aligned our child fares with the province. So in terms of actual service delivery, we're never going to force the hand of the province. They're only ever going to provide service to us when they want to. But we have laid all of the groundwork for ensuring that people can get to those specific stations, right? So the one in Niagara Falls is the one that's been there for a long time, but is being upgraded. Same thing with St. Catharines, and both being very close to downtown means that there's a plethora of service routes in that area already. That's not to say we won't create some sort of morning commuter route or something once those trains start to go with a little more frequency. But with transit, it's a bit of give and take. You sort of have to start first so people will get on those routes before there's actually the demand for it. So to answer maybe your question going forward, yes, there will continue to be discussions about making sure that our service is aligned with the GO transit routes, both in terms of where the buses pick up and the train stations, to ensure that there is timely pickup both in the morning before to get people there and in the evening getting them home.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Rob, thank you so much for your presentation. It was great. I have the pleasure of sitting on the interim Niagara Transit Commission, getting ready to create the new commission and representing Port Colborne and our interests there. And as a result of that, I've made a point of getting out and talking to people to find out, what are the needs, how is the current system working for them. Yeah. And I got to say, the work that's being done is great. It is fitting everyone's needs from what I can see, except there are a few holes. Yep. One hole in particular is cash. And that is those people who, some are somewhat disenfranchised, some are for other reasons not able to use any kind of computers, cell phones. They don't, for many reasons, don't even have bank cards. So they need to be able to live in a cash world, and this transit system doesn't allow for that. So how can we better fit their needs? Are we actually looking at better fitting their needs? And the other one is the possibility of parents or agencies being able to purchase riders cards at really convenient locations like convenience stores, that sort of thing, where they can just be reloaded so that whoever's got them can get transit when they need it. Are those things being considered now, or is that something that we're going to be waiting for the new Transit Commission to be doing?
Through you, Mayor, a little bit of A, a little bit of column B. In terms of cash, we're in a bit of a holding pattern, just simply because in order to put in new boxes into the vehicles is costly, to say the least. And just given the amount of time that those vehicles will likely be in our possession, even though we don't really own them currently, I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I think that will come up in the discussion of the 2023 review of the vehicles that we're using, because we do talk about cash and cashless every couple of weeks at a variety of different meetings, whether it's NRT on demand or the larger fixed route service. I think everybody recognizes that we're not going to get away from cash for an extended period of time, but we don't know what the best way of implementing that on, especially on a service like NRT on demand, allowing those drivers to have cash on them while they're out and about and not necessarily in the urban area on a large vehicle that offers protection like a fixed route bus does. There's sort of another side to that as well, you know, and even on our Niagara Specialized Transit Service, while we do technically take cash, we don't take cash. 99% of our payments are done either with a prepaid pass or over the phone. So the second part is, are people going to be able to buy like reloadable passes? Yes, that's all part of what's coming next year. Again, I don't want to give you a date because then I have to own up to it when we may or may not meet that date, but it is coming very early on. We're looking to have everything installed between now and the end of the year, and it's just a matter of, you know, getting the processes in the back end straight so we don't end up causing more damage than good when we do launch it.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a statement. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't take a look back and thank the people that kind of voted to even start the transit system. At that time, it was not really that popular to be on the transit side. You know, it was expensive. There's no doubt about it. Still, it always will be. I don't think there's a transit system that pays for itself, maybe in the whole world. You know, that's just the reality of it. But, you know, if some of those people that started it could be sitting around and looking at where we are now, pretty freaking amazing, I can tell you. I think the mayor and I were in those early discussions, and, you know, it's just amazing to be at this stage right now, even though there's a long ways to go and there's problems. We never would have had those problems or even a chance to talk about them if someone hadn't put up their hand and said, let's do this. So it's really important. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? See that, Rob, again, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
If I could have Councillor Bodnar and Councillor Wells move to receive the delegation. Seeing no questions, all those in favor? That's carried. Pardon? Yeah, we'll give you guys a minute if you want to leave now.
You're welcome to stay if you want to.
If you want to stay and listen more. That's okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. Next, we're on to the mayor's report. So many thanks and congratulations for all the effort of public works staff and staff from other departments who chipped in to help at our operations center, and all the firefighters and staff at Fire Station 1. The Touch a Truck event at the Operations Center was Tuesday, September 27th in the afternoon, and it was a phenomenal event, believe me. When I got there, I was told more than 300 people had already arrived and passed through the gates. That was within the first 15 minutes, and that almost 1,000 people attended the 3-hour event. Kudos to Steve Shapowski and his team for coordinating all the equipment and the many community partners that they brought in. You guys did a fabulous, incredible job, believe me. It was just amazing, and the kids were having a blast. I've never heard more sirens and horns going off and hot dogs being eaten than that day, so that was phenomenal. And again, kudos to our fire chief, Scott Lawson, and his crew for another terrific fire safety open house at the fire hall, which was Saturday, October the 1st. These types of events really engage our community and our families by educating on so many levels. They teach the value of fire safety, fire prevention, all the steps to avoiding catastrophe. None of us ever think that it could happen to us. This week is Fire Prevention Week, so always remember, fire won't wait, plan your escape. I look forward to a pizza party with grade 8 students from Oakwood School. The students designed and painted the Mayor's Choice and the Paint to Plow event. This is the second year for that. All the schools in Port Colborne were invited to paint one of the big snow plows we use every winter to clear snow from our roads. All plows that were entered were well done. It was a very difficult decision, but the plow painted by Oakwood was the one that I picked. And actually, I had to go to Mrs. Steele to give me a hand on picking these. You know, they're all number one, but you got to pick one, I guess. So we just looked at them and we felt what Oakwood had done, just kind of representative of what we were looking for this year. So they were one. And so everybody knows, each painted plow will be used in the neighborhoods of the schools where they were painted, so watch out for them during snow season. So that's another great initiative by our city staff, not only bringing the snow plow painting program in, but now this year with having 7 plows, 6 from the schools, elementary schools, and 1 from the high, Lakeshore High School, they'll be out in those neighborhoods. So kudos again to you guys for 2 days of fabulous, getting people back together and having the kids have some fun. And watching a house burn at the fire department was pretty exciting for some of those little kids. One little girl came. Yeah, I'm sure. One little girl came dressed with her fire boots, her fire pants, jacket, and red hat. And she was front and center to watch everything. It was fabulous. And she was probably about 5 or 6. It was actually pretty cool with her and her family there. Speaking of snow season, I cannot wait to see the Christmas designs you have been working on for my annual Christmas card. This is another participation tradition, and we ask all children in Port Colborne up to grade 8 to design art for a Christmas card. They can use crayons, markers, paint, pencils, anything they want. My favorites are featured on cards we send out for Christmas, and the top 5 designs are featured on the City Hall float in the Santa Claus Parade. Yes, we are pleased to announce the nighttime lighted parade is back this year on the first Saturday evening of December, which is the 3rd of December, and the Grand Old Christmas at the museum is the first Sunday of December, which is December 4th. And again, finally, it'll all be in person. I know we've just wrapped up Thanksgiving, so Christmas feels a long way away, but believe me, it'll be here before we know it. Mark's going to try to keep that leftover turkey to serve at Christmas, eh, Mark? As I said, I can't wait to see the designs our talented youngsters come up with this year, and we thank you to all of the kids in Port Colborne for participating in the Christmas card. The letter citizens received about service line warranties a few weeks ago is an example of city staff trying to provide a good service and good advice to property owners. If the pipes on the homeowner's side of the property freeze and burst or break because they're old and worn out, that's a sudden huge expense many of us may not be able to cover. The service line warranties provides an option. If you already have insurance for your pipes, that's great. So if they fail and you've got it under your house insurance and it's covered, that's fabulous. But if you don't, this was an option for you to choose if you needed it. If the letter did nothing other than to have you check your own home insurance policy, then that was a good thing in itself. If you're covered for water damage due to freezing pipes, that's great. If you aren't, this is a good policy to consider. And yes, I am in the insurance business. but this has nothing to do with me, my business, or any other insurance broker in Port Colborne. This is a staff-driven initiative to help the citizens of Port Colborne with issues that they may come up with. Here it ends my mayor's report. Any questions? I'll start on my left. Any questions? Any questions? No? Great. Thanks. Oh, Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to let everybody know that I actually called Service Line and I'm going to be taking them up on it because my coverage is not there. So there we go.
Okay, good job, Councillor. Thank you. On to the regional councillor's report. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mayor Steele. It's good to be here with all of you. We rarely finished up our meetings in September, but there is a couple of things that I just want to bring you up to speed on. Apparently there has been a case of avian influenza identified in a mixed flock of birds, including chickens and geese and ducks in the Niagara region at a farm. So the Niagara Regional Public Health is working closely with the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Agriculture, as well as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, to monitor and respond to this situation. And really only the people working on that farm with those birds are at risk. However, Public Health did kind of put out a thing that says even though it's very rare in Ontario, they're really suggesting people not to pick up or handle wild birds that may be injured or obviously sick or dead because of this avian flu. So that's kind of like just a heads up to be careful if you see dead birds. The Niagara region, also we approved a new collective agreement with CUPE 1287. So no disruption in our high quality public services. And that includes planning department, social assistance, finance, court services, childcare, housing services, transportation operations, fleet maintenance, facilities maintenance, IT services, water and wastewater operations, landfill operations, and administrative services. So that's about 1,000 workers that will be at their jobs and taking care of what needs to be taken care of for residents in all of us in the Niagara region. There's also the first case of flu in the region. Flu vaccines will be available in October for high-risk people, such as those who are pregnant, the elderly, young children, Indigenous peoples, and those with chronic health conditions. And so you can expect the vaccine will be available for everyone by early November. So you can check the website, the regional website, and they do an update every Friday on information about the flu and kind of flu activity in the area. So it's another important thing just to kind of keep in mind. Not the last thing, but second to last, make sure you're on the voters list. So we all know there's an election October 24th. I want to wish you all well, and I want to say thank you to Donna for such good service. If you didn't receive your information for voting, you should contact our clerk's office, and they can help make sure that you are on that list and where you are supposed to vote. I'm really glad to see 8.4 on tonight's agenda, the MOU between Port Colborne and Niagara Regional Housing. We have the highest core need in Port Colborne for housing, so that's a great opportunity to increase that stock. And I want to tell you, I just loved driving in on Highway 3 up to the Jackknife Bridge today. That road is awesome. Thank you, Mayor Steele.
Well, thank you, Councillor, because it took a lot of hard work between the two of us to get staff to do that. So, and I'm glad I was out on it all weekend. We went up and down it a few times. It is. It's something long overdue, believe me. But yeah, the region's contractor did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, they did.
In and out fairly quickly too.
Yep.
A little disruption over there. Questions to our regional councillor? Councillor Bruno.
Actually, Barbara, I thought maybe you weren't going to mention the last bit, the asphalt, because I wanted to thank you and the mayor, and I know you're passing that on to the mayor, but I know the amount of bumps, bruises, cajoling, pseudo threats, whatever it takes, you're going to pave that road like you promised to. And so the one thing we'll all know about Barbara Butters is what she says is what she will fight the hardest to do. And so thank you to you both. And I know this is just about your swan song here, but rest assured that when it comes to Niagara Regional Housing or all these issues, we will be picking up the mantle to push the envelope and the timelines to be continued on all these issues. So thank you, Barb.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Thanks again, Barb. On to staff remarks. I'm going to go online first. Planner, Ms. Landry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a quick update for council. This update is on the Colborne Quarry Pit 3 expansion, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications. So staff has continued their work with the joint agency review team known as the JART, and that's made up of city staff, the region, and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority in reviewing the quarry expansion applications submission materials. So as of July of this year, the JART provided formal comments on the second submission of the applications. And then as of just last week, the applicant has made their third submission. So the JART will be reviewing the material in the coming weeks to determine if the comments provided have been addressed. A statutory public meeting to obtain feedback from the public will need to be held, and staff anticipate this meeting occurring in 2023. And following this meeting, a recommendation report will be brought forward for council's consideration. So as the process continues, staff will provide updates to council on the status of the applications. And happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Great, thank you. Questions? Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Denise. When it comes to council, what will we be actually voting on? Will it be zoning of the property?
Yeah, so through the mayor to the councillor, the application is for an official plan amendment as well as a zoning bylaw amendment.
Right.
So you'll be voting on both at the same time.
Yep.
Okay.
Fine. Yep.
Great.
Thanks.
Questions? Okay, great. Thanks, Denise. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Staff here, anything? No? Okay, perfect. Councillors' remarks. I'll start on my right. Councillor Wells.
The thunder was already stolen about Main Street being repaved. So. I won't go over that again, and pardon the pun. Thank you.
You'll go over it a lot smoother. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just say ditto, and that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Councillor Bruno.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Baggett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll break the pattern. I did have two concerns. Mr. Long answered the first one. It was regarding the irregular lots that came to council to be declared surplus, and we deferred it back because there was a Catherine Street property that was questionable. So my question was when these irregular lots would come back to council, and Mr. Long did give me a reply today. Oh, come on, thumb. That's been updated by staff, and it's ready for the council report's ready, but it requires one more round of review with senior staff and the city solicitor. So I thank Mr. Long for that reply, because I know a few people are watching tonight, and I told him I'd bring it up to council. My other concern, Mr. Mayor, is something I'm not happy about, is the recent closure of our urgent care this past weekend. And from my understanding, I learned it from CHCH for the first, initially, that the problem was we couldn't find a doctor for the one shift. And my question to, I guess, I don't know who answered the question, is to what extent did the Niagara Health go to finding one doctor to man our urgent care for the one long shift? Like, I know I've been there 4:30 in the morning at urgent care, and pretty well doctors don't show up till 6 o'clock in the morning anyways. So it's not 24 hours anyways, he may be in there, but they're waiting for somebody else to come in before the doctor came to the room, so that's my question, Mr. Mayor. I'm hoping Niagara Health could bring somebody in from another hospital even, and to cover the absence, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, and I can answer that only because on Wednesday, myself and Mayor Redekop had a phone meeting with NHS senior staff, so I can give you a quick overview here. There is an issue with regards to staffing not only emergency departments, but UCCs being Fort Erie and Port Colborne, and the 3 EDs being St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, and Welland. What they've been doing is they've been working with Hamilton, Halton, and Brant health units to work together to transfer doctors back and forth if needed, if they have the availability. So they have been working on that. There are 6 doctors that left the system based on, one was a short-term, I don't know if it was an illness or a leave. They're now just coming back, so that brings down to 5. Of those 5, one was a doctor, I believe, from the GTA that took a full-time position up there, and the other 4 were actually off on education to go from UCC to emergency department work, because a UCC doctor doesn't necessarily have the training to work in emergency departments. So there are those issues. Those are being trained now. So, you know, all of a sudden you've taken 6 out of the system, it puts a strain. The other 3 ED, or the 3 EDs in Niagara, from time to time do work a doctor short, but they do have enough doctors that they don't have to close those. Unfortunately, we did close for the shift on Saturday, and you know and I'm not going to say NHS has assured us this will never happen again, but if you can't get a doctor, you can't get a doctor, and it's more dangerous to open without a doctor than it is. So one thing we are lucky in Niagara compared to other municipalities in Ontario is the fact that you can close Port Colborne for a shift. 10 miles away we have Welland. 15-minute, 20-minute drive max for most people in Port Colborne to Fort Erie's UCC. So we are lucky. You go up north, you close a hospital or an emergency department or a UCC, it could be a 2-hour drive to some places. So we do have good health care in Niagara. They are working diligently to bring more doctors down. They're working diligently with the other health units that I said earlier to help move doctors around when these hospitals in their areas need them. We both told them, Mayor Redekop and I, how concerned we are, and that our citizens are concerned, and they're definitely concerned. This time of year, they average about 1 person an hour at the UCC, based on summer being over and the large influx of people you get across the lakeshore from Fort Erie to Wainfleet. So, you know, you're not getting as many people in that time. So to send those people elsewhere, they had people at the door, not only to direct people to the other 2 hospitals, but also if they needed to be taken there, they would get them there. So that was all looked after. They contacted the city's communications department, Cheyenne, on Thursday, and you guys all received it, I believe, either Thursday afternoon. I think it was Thursday afternoon. It came out to us with regards to the communications that that Niagara Health was sending out across Niagara for Port Colborne. Fort Erie was closed down for a number of weeks earlier in the summer, which didn't help either. They did see at that time, at the beginning, we had an influx of patients within Port Colborne's UCC, but it did taper off that most of them did go to Niagara Falls from Fort Erie, so they went to the emergency department there. So those statistics were followed when the UCC was closed in Fort Erie. We can work as hard as we can. Healthcare is not in the bailiwick of the city of Port Colborne. It is a provincial issue. So we will be contacting, both Mayor Redekop and I will talk about how we move forward with regards to dealing with this with the Minister of Health. There is an item that's coming up tonight from another municipality that I would hope that council will support, to send a message to the province on what we want to see with regards to doctors coming into the province. It's also a federal issue, as we all know. on how doctors are brought into Canada and how they're moved through the system at a faster pace than what they've been. You know, healthcare's changed since we were all kids. You know, I remember Port Colborne when we had an obstetrics department where my wife worked for many years. We had a pediatrics department. We had a full-fledged emergency department. We had a full-fledged ICU, surgery department. Times have changed. Those have all gone down to 3 hospitals for those services. Knock on wood, you know, the world didn't end where we really thought at that time it would once you take this stuff out. It hasn't. We brought more services into Port Colborne, either out of the hospital, out of Bridges, which has helped the community. But again, we do have Welland just down the road, which which does a good job for Port Colborne on the emergency department side. So, you know, we've got to look to those 3 units at St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, and Welland, and then the new hospital being built in Niagara Falls. So with regards to that, that's about as much as I can say is what we discussed on the phone. You know, but again, we were stressing, both Mayor Redekop and I, that, you know, we're not happy, but we understand what's going on. It's not a Port Colborne, it's not a Niagara. This is not only a province, it's a Canadian issue. All across Canada, there's a doctor shortage. And not every doctor can work UCC or emergency department. So it's not like we can take our local doctors and get them in there. If they don't have the training, they can't do it. There are a number of local doctors that do have the training for both UCC and emergency departments, and they fill in when they can. So Mayor Redekop's daughter is an emergency department doctor. He knows a lot about this. And she works throughout Niagara and out of our area also. So, but I can take more questions. But anything you need to know, please get it to myself and Scott. We'll certainly talk to senior staff at NHS and get any answers back that you need. But we need to ensure that, you know, our public remains safe, that we have the proper facilities, that we can treat non-emergencies within Port Colborne. In fact, I was there on Friday with a very badly sprained ankle. My wife, who works at the Welland Hospital in ICU, said Thursday night, "Do you want to go to Welland?" I said, "No, it's an emergency department. This is not an emergency. I'll wait till the morning." I went to our UCC, had an x-ray. My foot's not broken, but it is badly sprained. So it does its job for those minor injuries, that they can perform and do the task here, as opposed to flooding down to Welland where real emergencies need to be looked after. So there is a hierarchy of these things, and we need to make sure that our public knows that hey, if it's a cut finger, a sprained ankle, things like that, Port Colborne or Fort Erie can look after it. But man, oh man, if it's a heart attack or something severed fairly badly, you got to get to Welland. But in those cases, you should be calling 911 for the ambulance to get you to the hospital as fast as possible that can care for you. So, hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That's probably the longest reply I've had to concern in the 4 years at council, Mr. Mayor. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it is a subject that is near and dear to every heart in the city. So, Councillor Kalale.
Mr. Mayor, near and dear to my heart, as you all know. Do you have a number for the other night? How many people that went to the hospital and actually had to be redirected?
No, they haven't.
Okay.
Given that to, I mean, we can find that out.
The only reason I'm asking is that, you know, maybe we could do a better job of, I know how hard it is to let people know ahead of time, so they didn't waste the time going there if they needed to get to Welland, or they would have called an ambulance right from the house and gone out instead. That's my only kind of, because I wondered when I saw that, I thought, oh, how many people are going to show up there at the door, and, you know, then they have to make the trip. So that would just be my.
You're right, and these schedules are done 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
August. Beginning of August was when all these times were scheduled for all hospitals, whether it's an ED department or a UCC department. They waited to the last minute for scheduling to find a doctor, and then they had a cutoff date. They've got one where they have to announce that shift was they weren't going to open that shift. They did through their comms department, and then as well as we got it out on our social media. But they got it out as fast as possible from Wednesday, but it was middle of the afternoon Wednesday. They tried their darndest to get a doctor, again, whether it was in Niagara or from one of the health units that they work with on outside of Niagara. Again, this is not a Niagara, Port Colborne issue. This is across the province and across Canada issue, so.
So perhaps it's something that we need to really educate people in Port Colborne about exactly what you said. If it's an issue, even in the middle of the night, and it's anything beyond, you know, something that you think might need further care, that you do go directly to Welland to, you know, just because people do go to Port Colborne thinking, well, I can get cared for there, and then they get there and they have to be transferred, and that adds time too. So I'm not sure. It's a big piece to deal with. So.
It's amazing how many people from this end of the peninsula that go to Dunnville and use Dunnville's hospital.
Yeah, yeah, true.
Further questions? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, through you, just to address Councillor Coelho's point about notice to people and earlier, I did share the announcement that the city sent out. I put it out over social media, and other people had done the same. I saw it a lot all over social media for a couple of days. But what I didn't see is people reacting to it. It almost seemed to be that there was no notice of it. I'm not sure why that was, but possibly that it has to be wrapped in a different kind of presentation. I don't know, but people did not seem to be reacting to it, and I thought that was rather strange. But that's how it was. But it was well shared. So.
Well, it's certainly all over the news because anything with the word Port Colborne in it, it comes to my emails. There was a newspaper from Wawa that reported on this, but they stated that the UCC was closed all weekend. So I wrote a message to their editor and said, no, it's one shift from 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. on the Saturday, and they did correct their story. So, which was good because I mean, you don't want, not to say anybody from here reads the newspaper from Wawa, because I don't think they do, but you don't want other newspapers, specifically more local papers, picking that up and people thinking that it is closed all weekend, because it's not. So kudos to our staff, comm staff, because they have to take the information they're given. We can't make that up ourselves. That's the line from the NHS that we've got to put out to our citizens, and kudos to Cheyenne and that department for getting that out as soon as they received it. So, okay. Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all the council, actually I should tell you that I did have a call from CHH-TV in Hamilton. Unfortunately, they called me they were on their way here and they wanted to meet to do an on-site interview regarding the closure of the hospital, but unfortunately I wasn't able to meet with them. And by the time I got back to them, they had finished doing it, but they were onto it too. And I was happy to hear it because I thought, good, it will get out there even more, so thank you.
Yeah, I was not available in the afternoon, so by the time I got back home, that's when I received the email message that they sent me. So, okay. You're done, Councillor? Thanks. Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship to the Director of Public Works, there's been some concerns regarding speeding on Wellington Street. Is there anything that the City of Port Colborne is doing in regards to this?
Steve?
Through you, Your Worship, Councillor Beauregard. We've actually reviewed the area based on some complaints of speeding that we've heard from yourself and some of the other people in the area. And at this time, we have reviewed the area, and we're currently moving forward with completing a few items. One is defining what the widths of the road should be, and then painting them accordingly. So pending upcoming weather, we'll be painting Wellington Street as well. And then we'll also be installing our speed radar signs. More than likely that'll happen in the first week of November, maybe first to second week of November, so that we can start gathering some data too, and then we can make some further assessments as we have that data come forward to us.
And Councillor, just further to that, we do continue to deal with our staff sergeant here. They did a blitz there, I'll say about a month ago, and when he called me back with the results, the majority of people are people that live in that area. Which is the disheartening thing about it, is that, you know, it's not people cutting through that are not from here. It's locals that live near that street or on that street. So we'll continue to deal or work with our staff sergeant to do some more blitzes in that area. But just so you know, the majority of people that were ticketed were people that live in the area. Go ahead.
Yep. One recommendation from a resident that was on Wellington Street was maybe a flashing light at some of the stop signs. I forget what the intersection is, but I think there may just be. I'm just wondering whether or not, you know, you can if your staff can consider that as maybe a possible option.
Yep, through your worship, we definitely can consider that, based off some of the data that we do collect, that is a viable option.
Okay. Councillor Danch?
Yeah, just a couple points tonight through you, Mr. Mayor. Had some concerns around the Elm Main Street area with some of the trucks and the speeding and whatnot. I don't know if we can, I mean, it's not like we're gonna set up the cops and pull over tractor trailers, but maybe we could see if we can slow things down a little bit. Second thing was, you know, you mentioned the Dunville Hospital. My wife was there with my grandson Saturday night at 1:30 in the morning. We were in Dunville, and the little guy wasn't feeling good. Just over an hour, she was back with the meds and everything else. So it's a good alternative for sure. Dunville's got a good unit up there. So thank you, and that's it for me.
Okay. And I'll pass that along to our staff sergeant. And yes, we can pull over and ticket transport trucks. They have no issue with doing that. So, but we'll pass that along. Councillor Clayliff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to, I guess, Mr. Shapowski, again, another thank you. I've not had any, I don't know if Councillor Baggio's heard from anyone, but since the lights went up and different things about Cement Plant Road, seems to quieten down over there a little bit. And I want to tell you, when I go along, even the whole new Highway 13 being paved and everything, and even the slow barriers along the road there, everything's working really, really well. I was out for a drive, and I don't know, it just seems to, everything's coming together. I really like how it's going. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodnar?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Staff took care of any problems I had. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Okay, moving on for the items requiring separate discussion. Pull those up here. First item tonight is item 8.2, short-term rental follow-up report. And the recommendation is that Community Safety and Enforcement Department Bylaw Enforcement Division Report 2022-208 be received. That the recommendations of option 2 of Community Safety and Enforcement Department Report 2022-208 be approved. And that council direct staff to draft a short-term rental registration bylaw to be presented to council in 2023. If I could have Councillor Wells and Bagu move that to get it on the floor, and I'll go to Councillor Wells first.
Thank you, Worship. Through you two, maybe to Scott. I think Scott might have some of the answers. When we looked at this earlier in the year, and we came up with the idea of putting forward a voluntary registration on the short-term rentals, my understanding is that only 4 operators registered with company or with the city voluntarily. And that, to me, that seems to reflect the willingness of the short-term rentals operators to participate with the city. Is that number correct, or is that off?
Through the mayor to council, that number is dead on. Of the last time we checked, anyways, I don't believe anybody's registered in the last week.
Thank you. And following from that, I believe with what some of the questions I asked during the week, that the complaints that we had received and that your staff had responded to were fairly few. There were like 18 noise and 94 parking responses that were put forward. And out of all of those responding complaints, none of those were the 4 that had volunteered. Again, making a reflection on how these short-term rental locations operate as sort of, you know, they really don't tend to fall into being conducive with a neighborhood. Again, am I correct in that understanding?
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, you are correct. Of the complaints that you asked about, we can't attribute those to any of the short-term rentals. They weren't identified at that time of the complaint. I will say, since we penned this report and submitted it, we have had one property come forward, and we are aware of it. So I guess we could bump that number up a little bit, but we're working with NRP and our staff to work towards a resolution for that property.
Counselor?
Thank you. One more question. It's regarding Shirkston Shores. Shirkston Shores operates a business of short-term rental in regards to certain aspects of their community there. And there are other owners of properties in there that actually operate their own property as a short-term rental inside there. Is there any way that we can isolate Shirkston Shores from the rest of the short-term rentals, such that we can address maybe some more complex issues that are related to the short-term rentals over a period of time, rather than to have to do it all in one sort of fall swoop?
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, I'm going to let the clerk deal with this. She takes care of licensing, so I think you'd get a better answer, more accurate.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Steele. So the short-term rental operators are people that are renting their homes on a short-term basis for those transient accommodations, typically up to 28 days. It's well within council's purview to exempt certain classifications of short-term rentals. For example, bed and breakfasts, motels. However, when we're looking at that, we want to look at the intent of the registration of the STRs. And those things are like create a level playing field for all short-term rental owners and operators to provide consumer protection, create accountability for and to our ratepayers for short-term accommodators and visitors, ensure occupants are provided with safe accommodations in terms of fire and building safety, and ensure that the owners and operators are made aware of their responsibilities to comply with our municipal bylaws. Shirkston Shores is subject to most city bylaws and fire code regulations. So in this instance, they would be, if council were to choose option 2, which is registration, it's at no fee. So the registration cost is $0 for all operators. However, it just provides the enforcement staff with another tool in their toolbox if there's any concerns from the short-term rentals operating out of Shirkston Shores.
Counselor?
Okay. I believe Shirkston Shores have their own enforcement group, and I'm just wondering how that would impact our bylaw enforcement group when it's internal problems rather than external problems outside of the resort, and how our staff would have to accommodate that type of enforcement when they may not even have any bylaws to go back on. I'm really curious about that.
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, our bylaws are still in effect on their property, whether it's noise. I mean, they do have certain exemptions for burning. I guess that exemption doesn't matter anymore, right? Because we've changed our rules within the city, but they're still have to follow noise regulations. They still submit for fireworks permits, everything else that everybody else does. The only thing that they do a little bit differently is if a resident in one of the short terms has an issue, they'll call security and it's dealt with inside. I'm going to say, and I'm assuming that the vast majority of the complaints are dealt with and never get to the city.
Counselor?
And I guess that's where this communication problems happens. I mean, if we are not aware of it, we don't know how it's being monitored. We don't know if those bylaws are actually being enforced. Again, it just seems like it complicates the issue because it's inside of the boundaries there. And I think it would, if we can look at wrestling that one maybe on a separate basis rather than the rest of it outside. I'm just looking for some simplicity to being able to roll this out, because we've heard in the report that it's going to involve hiring more people. It's going to be more costly to go to handling all of this. So I'm just wondering if there's any benefit to pulling Shirkston Shores out of it for a temporary basis and then bringing it back in at a later date.
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, staff's actually recommending something that we don't believe will have an increase in staff needed. And it can be stair-stepped. The big thing is to know what we're dealing with and how big what we're dealing with is. And then I believe if we went with the mandatory registration and we put in some some incentives that they get registered. We do have ways to data mine to get people that are on different websites, Airbnb, I don't know them all off the top of my head, but there are ways for us to start that enforcement, and then maybe within a year and a half, we come back to council with some really solid numbers of what we're dealing with, and I think we'd be a little bit better prepared to make a good decision for this municipality.
Councillor?
That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Baggy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Approximately 2 weeks ago, myself, yourself, Mr. Mayor, and Chief Lawson met with about 8 constituents in Ward 1 on, I guess you call it lakeshore property owners and surrounding owners, and they had big concerns about a Airbnb or a short-term rental in their location. They've had a lot of problems with it consistently. Thank you, Chief, for your input, and Mr. Mayor, and I do support this option too. One problem we did have was when the owner of the actual building is the one causing the problems. Example, say 50 people show up in individual vehicles, and then if we had a short-term rental policy, it would not take effect because it's not a short-term rental. It's more of an owner having a problem with noise or vehicles and stuff like that. And our bylaw did step in. The police were called, and they do appreciate that. They do have a lot of concerns still with that one address. I'm sure Chief Lockyer and Mr. Mayor, they definitely know where it is. And there's a few of them out here today. And one of the things you mentioned in your option 2 is additional AMP fines can be created with dealing with non-registered properties. We talked about a little bit about bylaw, about the noise fines and that. Like, what is the actual noise fine for a homeowner?
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, off the top of my head, I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you. I'm going to say it's about 250, 300, maybe somewhere in there. Oh. And we have talked. We're hoping to bring something to council that under AMPs we're not allowed to be punitive, but we can stair step it. So if you have multiple infractions, what we would like to do is bring it to council for approval that the second one would be double that price. So let's say it was 200, now it's 400. The next infraction would be 800, and so on and so on. It's supposed to be corrective, and if we did it that way, we are correcting the behavior without it being punitive in the eyes of the court.
Just further the councillor's question, with regards to whether it's a rental or an owner, those charges would be the same, correct?
We can still charge, but we couldn't do those 3 that we're suggesting that we create for the short-term rent. But we can definitely do noise.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep.
Just to confirm what your question was.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
I do thank you for the suggested progressive fines for the noise things, and it says here also it's going to come back in sometime in the first quarter of 2023. I'm hoping it comes back early for the next council to approve, and if it does get approved in the first quarter, what is the approximate timeline for starting this? Like, is it going to be for the spring?
Chief?
Immediately? Or?
Through the mayor to council, we could start the advertising. I think we're going to have to give a grace period for these people to register. And off the top of my head, I'm going to say 6 months, but that would put us deep in the heart of rental season. If we don't give a grace and we start ticketing people, I don't think that's fair and looks good on what we're trying to do here either. So I think we can have, staff can have more discussion, and hopefully whenever we bring this forward, I would hope it's early in January, late or sometime in that period, we can have those recommendations, and maybe with council's help, we can massage those to make them work.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do appreciate it, Chief Lawson, because I know we're not going to get perfect the first time. It's going to be progressively improved until we get all the bugs, their I's dotted and T's crossed. I know Fort Erie has it, and they've gone through some growing pains, and we will also, but I just want to assure the residents that we are acting on it. And as for Shirkshire Shores, I agree with Councilor Wells. They may be a separate entity at the beginning, but I think we should concentrate on the residents of Port Colborne outside of Shirkshire Shores first. And they're the ones that are really, they're paying good dollars for taxes. They're paying, they're not used to what's happening here. And it's going to get worse before it gets better, if we don't do something. And there is talk about people that have short-term rentals now are looking to expand on our lakeshore properties. They're going to neighborhoods, say, hey, if you sell your property, let me know, I'll buy it, without going through a realtor. So these are people from maybe the Toronto, they drive a Mercedes, Audis, a $200 fine, that's nothing for a party for the night for 40, 50 friends. So progressively, I agree with 100%. And that's about it, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to thank some of the constituents that were here tonight, Mr. Mayor, to support this option 2. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't sure where this was going to go, and as soon as Shirkson gets into it, I'll declare conflict on the Shirkson part of it. But I wonder whether we could separate that off if we're going to vote on it. I'd like to talk on the rest of it because
we can. I'll separate that for you.
Thank you. I kind of kicked this off, and I'd like to have a few kicks at the can here yet. So, look, we read the letter from Mr. LeBlanc, and that's what happens. That's exactly what happens. It happened in my neighborhood. It is disruptive. It is not right. And there needs to be a hammer to shut these guys down right away, somehow. And I agree, $200 isn't a big fine to people that paid maybe $1 million or $2 or $3 for a house that they're turning into a short-term rental. But this will increase. It will increase. There are homes right now that are being bought for that very reason. Maybe they're great people, and people that have short-term rentals and care about the neighborhood, you're not going to have a problem with them. They're going to make sure that they aren't a problem. But other people, the fines it costs of doing business. It just is, that's what it is. And they don't really care. So however we work this out, we got to put some teeth in this that we can really whack the bad guys, really. So I'll wait to hear if somebody else has something to say. But this kind of reminds me of when we didn't close the beach, right? And all of a sudden we're overwhelmed with things. Well, if we don't close this up, it's going to jump on us by, tenfold or something, and then we're going to be going, geez, we should have done something. So I'd like to see something in place anticipating that this is going to get worse, because it is. There's no doubt about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Chief?
Yeah, if I could just have a moment, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor to Council, I just want to revisit the exempting Shirkston out of this. I kind of look at this as a user's fee and how they use up staff time. And I can tell you, I spent a lot of time down at Shirkston dealing with different kinds of complaints this year. And I'm just suggesting that we keep Shirkston in the back of our minds as far as adding them to this, because staff spends a lot of time down there dealing with different kinds of complaints that come out of that complex. So please don't dismiss that.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Bruno and then Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to pick up where Councillor Bodnar left off, because my first reaction, honestly, was in this age of social media and communicating where to go amongst a crowd, a certain sector of the renters, that's potentially easy pickings along the lakeshore. That network of social media and people who don't want to obey is pretty vast. And so my first reaction is that we're spending a lot of time on this, but I guess maybe you'll have to convince me why this can't move along faster, particularly the communications piece. With respect to a grace period, like, I mean, the way people communicate today, I mean, you know, if we wanted to tell the world that we've got this tough bylaw and it's out there, just like the beach, word will get out very quickly as to who is the strong arm and who isn't. And I guess I just don't see, I mean, I'd rather lose in court because we didn't get the notice out and head off 90% of the people who'll generally listen to that notice. You know, it's the old adage. I mean, for years I would criticize the department on, like, you know, debris and yards. Like, you know, you're going to warn 100 people, 60 will do it right away, right? 20 you got to give them a notice, 10 you know will obey, and 5 you'll see on the courtroom steps. You can't worry about the 5 because 95 you're going to get it there, and so that's not directed at you, Chief, having just taken over. But I mean, I don't see what's wrong with making a much shorter notice period and communications period. Surely to God, when you get the message out and you have that first infraction, you're going to see some people getting in line and some not. But whatever you clear off that table that you don't have to enforce is a bonus to what you got to enforce. And I'm sure I'm talking words to you that you know you've dealt with before. So the other one, the 2 other questions I had here is, like, in the background, point number 3, and maybe you're going to have to explain to me units. So number 3 is in the background. Our city clerk be directed to bring forward a recommendation for licensing short-term accommodations that rent 2 or more units. So if I buy a house and I rent it out to 12 people on a weekend, is that 1 unit? And do I not fall under this because I'm 1 unit? Like, what is a unit?
Chief?
So through the mayor to council, right at the top, that was from February 22nd. We've kind of steered away from that. If you're a short-term rental, you're a short-term rental. We're not looking at any caveats to fit you in. If you rent it out, you're a short-term rental.
Okay.
So that was just kind of the background highlights from back in February. That we're not looking at that anymore.
Okay. And just lastly, so under option 2, again, I'd rather us dealing from strength than maybe some timidity here. As part of the mandatory registration, additional AMP fines could be created to deal with non-registered properties. I guess I want to start off with, if you don't register, you're going to get a fine. And so, you know, could to me says either we're going to study it, it's an indeterminate date when we're going to do it, and this is the off season. To me, this is when you get the work done so that it's ready for the on season. So from my point of view, you know what, if you can't be bothered registered and you're found it out, you know, you're going to get a fine. And then you're on the radar. And you know, it's, I think, you know, good people and good operators will have no problem doing this. I mean, it doesn't get much better than free. And if you don't do it, you know, I don't think they'd want to have it happen next to their house. I mean, good operators don't want bad clientele, and they want to re-rent it. So I guess if there's anything I could say is faster, please.
Chief, on that?
Through the mayor to council, we can go as fast as we're instructed to. I think it'd take us a little bit of time just with our communication staff, but I think the groundwork is there. I'm looking at the clerk and I'm waiting for a nod. The majority of that groundwork is there. I apologize for the could. That's we're waiting for direction from council, right? So it will happen, and it's just a matter of us getting that through the courts, getting it approved, and.
Well, that was the other thing, because you got to do the court thing. You got to start now, because it might not even happen.
It's actually getting easier now.
Okay.
back into the courts.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm
Release.
through you to the clerk. Do you need a motion to start quicker, or you have direction here now if we all nod, or what's your take on it?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mayor Steele. So with the motion passing this evening for option 2, administration will start drafting that bylaw. We did look at the council schedule when we were determining when the bylaw will come back. We feel that January, February is the best option with the onboarding of the new council. And then we will start an aggressive education campaign, and then the enforcement can commence.
Okay.
Okay. Councilor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Chief, thank you so much for moving on this. I think council sounds like it's really in agreement that this is a terrible situation that has to be acted on immediately. And so we don't necessarily want to be waiting for very much of anything. I would think that rolling the program out, letting people know that they must register, is about as educated as they need to be. Mm-hmm. At that point, they've received that notice, fines start immediately. You have this much time to register. If you haven't done it, fine start. Simple as that. Walking back on things doesn't work. Giving grace periods, I think, just allows people to look for more and more and more loopholes, buy more and more and more time. There's no need for it in this. They're already making a fortune on everybody else's pain. And that's really what's happening, because if you are anywhere near these people and these homes that are being overwhelmed by this, I'm thinking mostly around by Cedar Bay, it is horrible. Those people, there's absolutely no respect for the surrounding properties or the people that live in them. So moving on that as quickly as possible is the way to go, I think, there. I would ask, though, I would love to see council support staff direction to go out and look for more options for even more punitive measures. Looking beyond the simple fine structure and looking into are there ways to secure to literally remove a person's property. Can you do that? Are there ways to do that? Because at this point, you're right. If you're owning a property like this and you're making mega thousands over the years, over the year, renting out to people who obviously don't care. They have open checkbooks. They don't care. The fines are really not a huge impact. They would be to your average person, but these are not your average people. So, but losing a property and losing that source of income, that's an impact. I would think that we want to work toward that sort of thing, where you're the punishment for what you've done is major, and not fooling around with it, because this is not. There's nothing about this that is in any way good for the city. Not anything at all. So I would think that we could move forward in that way, and I would love to see staff look for those options and bring that back to council at some point. But for now, I think this is a very good start. I think that option 2 provides us with what we need to start moving in that direction, to get all the groundwork laid, all the pieces in place that you can just pop other pieces in as you need them going forward. So it makes sense to do it this way. I don't agree with taking Sherkston out of the picture. I absolutely don't agree with that. I think that in the case of Sherkston, when there is a problem there, if it's an internal problem, it's reported internally, it's not likely reported to the city, it gets taken care of. So it don't really cross wires that way. If it's reported to the city and reported to Sherkston, well, it's reported to the city. We now have to go out and take care of it. So I don't think taking Sherkston out of the play makes any sense at all. And I think that they're big players. They know their stuff. They're probably more on top of this than we are. So I would think that having them on board may be actually beneficial to everyone, and I would say keep them in. But that's really what I have to say. Option 2, and keep Sherkston in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just an answer to Councillor Demery's question with regards to how far you can take your fines or stopping a person from using that property for short term.
So we will, through the mayor to
it's
council.
Fine.
Yep. That's a great question. I don't believe we could step on the rights of ownership, but we can definitely look at going down the part 3 through the court system. I will tell you that it's a long-term option for us, and I'm hoping that if our fines can be punitive enough and progressive enough, that we will get the correction needed. Part 3s do work. We've used them in the fire department for years and years, but it can take a year or two to get that solution, right? And until that time, our charges are stayed. So that person, in theory, could continue to operate.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for asking that question. That is good information. But I would think that because of the popularity of these short-term rentals and the problems they're causing across the province, across the country, I think you're going to start seeing changes to what can be done to these people. So I just leaving the door open and keeping an ear to the ground on this would be a good thing.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the chief. Is licensing the same as registration?
Chief?
Through the mayor to the council, I'm going to flip that right back to the clerk. I think that's her specialty.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Steele. So the registration program will be that the short-term rental is registered with the municipality. We have their contact information. Again, most bylaws would be enforced depending on what the issue is. If it's noise, it would be done through the noise bylaw. However, then we have the registration process where if we find that they are operating without being registered, then there's additional fines that can be levied up against the property. With licensing, there was a home sharing guide shared by the province in 2018 by the Ministry of Finance. So within that, there are different things that we can look at within a licensing regime that is mentioned in option 3. So there you can look at different things like zoning. You can limit the maximum days per year. You can prohibit and put it on like a building list where you cannot build specifically to operate a short-term rental. I'm trying to think of the other things. Limit the maximum number of consecutive days that the operator can rent out the premise. So within the licensing regime, there are little more items that you can include to regulate and prohibit in some cases. With the registration process, again, it'll just be a database that the chief mentioned where the municipality knows who's operating short-term rental. And when we go to enforce, there's the additional fines that can be laid.
Counselor?
So just to pick up on that, can someone please check with Fort Erie? I haven't read theirs in a while, but my understanding what they have is a licensing. They license it, give the short-term rental people 30 points. And every time you get a complaint, you lose so many points. When you get down to a certain number, they pull a license and you can't be an Airbnb. And that is what we need to help people that are being jerks. You know, you've got to have that, sorry, do something else. Sell the place to somebody else, they'll make it a home. That's where we got to get to. That gets people's attention. So let's check that out too while we're working on a bunch of it.
Yep. Chief, on that?
Through the mayor to council, the only caveat I really want to look up is the difference between registering and licensing, because I believe when you start talking licensing, there's implied inspections that would have to happen, and that's the piece that kind of scaring us as far as a person that's used to work in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Their B&Bs are inspected yearly by bylaw, fire. So there's a bigger piece and more staff time that gets involved. So I want to be careful of what we call it and what requirements we put on ourselves with what we call it.
And with what Councillor Bodnar said with regards to Fort Erie, they've had a number of changes to their bylaws. They've moved through this very similar to what we're doing. So I'm sure you're in constant contact with them and what works best and what doesn't work, because I know they have both on there. So, Councillor Clayla.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk. You know, I keep hearing everyone talking about vacation rentals by owner, all of this stuff that everybody's doing. But I'm just wondering, there is a vacation rentals, RVBO, that we've actually used to rent homes in Florida. That we never even talk with the actual owners of the home. This is all done through companies and different things. And you pay a lot more money, and you pay insurance, and you have to damages, all the rest of it. And the rules are like boom, boom, boom. You never really kind of deal right with the actual owner of the property. Is that our problem here? That people that are doing these short-term rentals are dealing with the actual owners who aren't bothering to take care of all this stuff? And maybe people who want to do short-term rentals have to go through some kind of a company like RVBO, where they vacation rentals, so that it is taken care of, and that there's some accountability in all of this. Because I'll tell you, they come down on you hard and heavy when you do these other ones that we've done when we go away. And like I said, you know, there's deposits paid, there's all kinds of things, there's inspections after, before. I mean, you know, the place looks better usually when I leave it than when I found it, even, you know, because you're worried you're going to get hit with all these things. Is that the difference here? That these are just people who own the house, they're just renting it to any Joe Blow who wants to rent it?
Chief?
Through the mayor to council, we can look into that. I mean, I believe whatever we want to call this, licensing or registration, we're going to keep the honest person honest, right? So there's always going to be that absentee landlord. We see that in rentals, full-time rentals within the city, right? We have some good landlords, we have some bad ones. And I think to Councillor Bodner's saying is there's got to be a mechanism for us to nail the bad ones and just know where the good ones are. And I think that's what we're kind of discussing tonight.
I guess that's why I just thought that perhaps if the requirement to have a short-term rental was that you had to go through a company to take care of it for you, to manage it, it would be much easier. It would be better dealt with because they would be dealing with the issues and the problems.
I don't know if we can mandate how a person runs their business, though. That would be my only concern.
I'm not sure, because like I said, I know that there are the private people and people who go the other way. Just a thought.
Councillor Bodner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just to respond to Councillor Kleyloff's question there. Yeah, one of the bad guys do go through those companies.
Do they?
Yeah, but the company, by the time, they're not going to drive down there and put a stop to the big party going on all night, keeping people awake. They just aren't. So, you know, we need that on the ground hammer to hit them with.
Yeah, you're fine. Okay. Councillor?
Through your worship to the chief, I would like to say that as a comment, I'm in favor of this option 2. I think moving forward with the registration process is a good step forward, and maybe looking at other measures, as Councillor Desmarais mentioned, that could be a little bit more punitive in nature with those Part 3 offenses. I think those type of methods are something that we can look at doing to get those who operate the most poorly, I suppose, or cause the most disturbances in our municipality. But one thing in the registration process that I would like for maybe the city to look into is gaining information on the entity that owns the property. I'm really curious as to how many of these owners are corporations as opposed to natural persons. That might help us in how we proceed in dealing with with Airbnbs in general moving forward.
Thank you, Council. Chief?
Through the mayor to council, so I can assure you that I've been in the courts lots in the last few years. We can still go after directors on any corporation, and we always, if we're laying informations, we do the corporation and the directors, which are usually the owner of the property. So I think we've got a pretty good handle on that end of enforcement and how to deal with it.
Councillor?
Through to Fire Chief. I guess it wasn't so much on the enforcement aspect that I'm curious as to the corporations and the natural persons. I think it's just more of understanding of who or what entities are the most problematic, just for our purposes.
Chief?
Through the mayor. So just for clarification, you're almost saying that we would know if Corporation 123 has this property, this one, and then we can kind of deal with them as a group if we have multiple properties? Is that kind of what you're...
Potentially, yes. Maybe we can implement different measures for corporations as opposed to those that are private entities, or maybe it'll just help our policies on Airbnbs or short-term rentals, in general. It would just be good information, I think, to obtain.
Yeah. Through the mayor to council, I'm sure we're going to have more data, then we'll know what to do with once we're done.
Good. Further questions? Okay, so Councillor Bodnar does, if Shirkston Shores is put into the bylaw in name, as opposed to just being a bylaw for the city, then he's got a conflict. So I've got Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu that both actually made the comment with regards to Shirkston. So I will take an amendment for that. How council votes on that, that's up to your pleasure. But if I could have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu put that on the floor so we can deal with it separately, and then we can deal with the main motion. That's fine. So the clerk and I have kind of wordsmithed something here, if this is okay, Councillor Wells, is that we have Shirkston left off in the short term and added as we move forward at the end of the first year of the bylaw to reevaluate the inclusion of Shirkston Shores. Something to that effect? Or do you want to, you can wordsmith it however you want, but I thought we'd get it out there so we know what we're voting on.
I believe that they need to be included, and I think the sooner the better. I was concerned that there would be an issue of conflict with Councillor Bodnar, and that was one of the reasons why I would like, if there was a way of separating it so we could get his input on it without impacting the Shirkston Shores aspect of it. And that's where the complexity of this situation comes in that I'm trying to address. But I do think Shirkston Shores plays a big role in what goes on, how it goes on, and that we do need to enforce it evenly across the city, regardless of whether it is in Shirkston Shores or it's on a private laneway or wherever.
Yeah.
So
then, as long as we're not naming Shirkston Shores within the bylaw, which you're not, correct? No. Then it's a general bylaw across the city, which every other bylaw, so nobody should have a conflict on any of these, correct?
Yep.
So if we just leave it as it is, as the motion has been presented by staff, then the councillor doesn't have a conflict. But what I was hearing earlier is that you may want to remove it for a short term to get this going, but if I'm hearing you right now that if you're satisfied with what staff has answered tonight, leave it in. It's across the board, no matter where you are. So then it's not specific to any one location.
No, I agree, and I agree with my experience with conflicts of interest, is that if he's representing the general opinion of the residents, then he has no conflict.
Correct.
If it's a common conflict, a common issue between all parties, then it is not a conflict of interest. So in that regard, I don't see a conflict of interest in regards to it. So I'm just, as long as we can make sure that it's noted in there that it is not, it's a common, it's
common
applied
across
the
Correct.
entire city.
Yeah.
Then I'm fine with it.
You all right with that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, option 2 states in the report that it would include the municipality in a whole. So
Okay.
there would be no conflict at this time and the main motion can be voted on.
So you're okay not putting in an amendment? I'm good. You're okay with that? Okay. Perfect. Councillor.
Just wondering if in the
microphone, please, Councillor. Sure.
In the chief's investigation of this, I mean, one of the ways, I think one of the ways you want to look at Shirkston is naming the corporation. And I think we need a different potential strategy there or some legal advice on this. Because it is a lot easier to name the company, which causes them to clean up the problem, than us to try and get 20 complaints of noise at Shirkston. As a chief, is the bylaw going to go out and pick on trailer 20 on Dune Lane, or is it going to the management? Is it laying that part 3, if it comes to that, on the company or on the offender? And why I think you need legal advice on this is now that, so for example, Shirks and Shores collects the taxes from all those people, and we send out one bill and we get one check. But, if somebody infracts in one of these bylaws and they're paying taxes, is the chief and company supposed to look at lot number 20? Because I think there's a grander, easier way to put them to be accountable for all those residents. And now you're dealing with management and the fines and the registration fees for 1,500, as opposed to being out there a lot looking at individual bylaw complaints. I don't know the answer, but I think it's potentially a different answer and needs some investigation, maybe legal as well.
So we'll take that as direction to both the chief and the clerk. And speaking with the clerk, she said it's fine, we don't need a specific amendment to it, so they can take that. So if it's brought back to this council and Shirkston is specifically listed, that's when a councillor can declare that conflict of interest, but at this time they don't need to.
Yep.
Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. Further questions? Anything further from staff? You're all set as we move forward? Okay. Just to, there is included within this report delegation material from Don LeBlanc, so that is embedded in the report itself, just so Mr. LeBlanc knows that. Okay, seeing no further questions, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thanks, Council, great discussion. And thanks to the public that came out on this. Next is item 8.3, City Real Estate Hydro Corridor Update. Recommendation that Chief Administrative Office, Economic Development and Tourism Division Report 2022-225 be received for information. The Council declares the properties along the hydro corridor shown in Appendix A as surplus. If I could have Councillor Wells and Begg move that. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to maybe Gary Long or Bram Cotton. A couple of questions. The first one is the maps that were provided and the descriptions on some of the properties, when I looked at them, appeared to miss a few sections. And I want to just make sure that when we declare these, that we declare all of those properties, if we do declare them, all of them, not leave any out that you have to come back after and address. The two parcels that I saw missing was the southern portion along Fielden Street of the hydro corridor, and then the western portion of the corridor between the high school and the residence on Brock Street. Okay, so those were the two areas I saw missing out of the maps, and I just want to make sure that they're included. So if you can maybe comment on that to make sure, to let us know and confirm that they are included.
Staff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells and Council, yes, they are included. They are included. We were asking for all of them to be declared surplus.
So just to clarify, Councillor, with those, map number 3 shows the Fielden Avenue area, and the area to the south is the hydro substation. That's fairly new. That's on Fielden Avenue. And then maps 4 and 5 are from Fielden Avenue between Port High and McKay, and map 5 shows Fielden Avenue to Steele behind Brady Street. And you'll see that the high school's to the south, and the houses on Steele and Brady and part of McKay's playground is on the northern side of that map.
I see that there. But if you look at map 3, and you see the two identified pieces of property, the one on the top of the map being the larger portion, then one between the hydro lines. But the one on the southern portion, there's a small section which would be roughly 15 feet by 222 feet. That's not included in there. And just want to make sure if the resident on Fielden Street that was interested in that portion of the property, that property is available for them to be sold, and they don't have to come back and ask for it later. the one.
Yeah, but just to clarify, the property that's abutting that is Hydro's, CMP's substation. There's not a house to the south of that, that's the substation, which is fairly new.
On the east side of Fielden Street?
It's on the east side of Fielden, south of those lines.
That would be
It's the old
Okay.
Cadet Hall property.
Okay, then I'm clarified then.
Yeah, just,
Thank you.
yeah, because, yeah, yeah, and the next closest house is on the corner of Delhi and Fielden.
Okay,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our intent is to declare them all surplus.
okay, that's good. All right. The other question that I had, just for clarification, you did identify with CNP these setbacks required. Now, those setbacks are for the development or building structures. But what can we do underneath those hydro lines? Is there anything that we can do, like a parking lot or parking spaces, green spaces? What can we do underneath those so that they can be inclusive with the properties and so that any potential purchasers know what they can do on that?
Mr. Cotton?
So traditionally, under these type of power lines, you do not, they're not necessarily what you call open play, what I'd say can be developed. We can go back to determine, before we put anything for sale or before we made any determinations, we can go back and have the better understanding. But traditionally, under these power lines, you don't have parks or things like that. They're generally closed off. They're not closed off, but they're generally not what I call open for the public or public use from what we've seen. But we can continue to clarify and to refine this as we move forward.
Because I know of parking spaces underneath those that are on our city streets. And they are allowed to park cars underneath them on the city street. So if we can do it there, why couldn't we do it on the property itself? I just wanted to make sure that if we need parking spaces in order to develop it, if that's an option for us to utilize, then it's in our favor of doing that.
I'd agree, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd agree with you, Councillor Wells, and as I said, we'll continue to refine that as we look forward to moving these properties.
So just to clarify something the councillor said, with my work on the police board, in our parking lot expansion between NRP headquarters and the OPP station, we put a new parking lot in. The hydro lines we went over to, took 3 years to get that agreement made, and we had to fulfill a lot of obligations with regards to how that was built and the way it was going to be built and what we parked under it and all that. So it could be done. Never say it can't, but it could be done. So you're all, go ahead.
Just even within the setback, a 5-meter setback.
Microphone, please, well, your microphone?
I'm sorry. Sorry, I did push it, but I didn't push it. Even with a 5-meter setback, that's more than enough for a standard parking space. So within that setback period, which means the hydro lines wouldn't be directly over the parking anyway. So
Yeah.
again, anything we can do to enhance the sale of that would be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Begg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess to Mr. Cotton, I drove around the blocks looking at this thing the last couple of days, and is there any reason why they just can't relocate the hydro wires? Put them down, send them down Canal Street?
Mr. Cotton?
You're referring to a complete relocation of the hydro poles, moving the entire path, like just taking these properties out from having any hydro lines over top?
Yeah, remove the bird nesting or bird resting areas. Yeah, remove the wires, send them down Canal Street to Steele Street, and come back across. I don't know if hydro is that even proposed with hydro, but we could just get rid of the wires. It'd be best deal scenario for everybody.
Mr. Cotton?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu and Council. We have not discussed that with CN Power. Wasn't on the agenda from when we were talking about these lands. That is something we could take back and see their initial thoughts, I guess.
You'd have to look at the cost. We would bore that.
Yeah. And that, of course, would be all part of it, yes.
And I know in our discussions on another project that we had recently with them, something about not even a tenth of this size was about 2 to 4 million to move wires. This would be a lot, you never get your money back in sales to do it. And these are main lines, these are main feeder lines for that whole area, so. It's not, it might not be as easy as we think, but let's ask, can always ask the question.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. You recall when this was first brought up, and maybe I'm going to preempt myself by saying this is to declare them surplus, not necessarily to, at this time, a planned disposal of them because of these issues Councillor Wells and Councillor Baggio have mentioned. The reason I asked that is because I did have a discussion a week ago with Bram about, and just maybe I'm a, trust but verify kind of proponent, is that I'm not so sure that I'm willing to just take at first blush what Canadian Niagara Power has said based on what level of investigation they did. Not that their overall premise is wrong, but every lot is different. So I asked Bram to go out to either the people we use or someone like GAMS who does work in Niagara, who's a private contractor, and not say, if I own this line, come out here and look at it, and if I wanted to bury it or move it over a bit so that my setback isn't as much and it creates a lot. Like, my view of this is any of these properties that can already make a lot without having to move the line, we should look at being able to get on with those. The other ones, though, I just really would like, at $200,000 a lot, I'm prepared to get outside expertise to say, can this thing be buried? And if it was buried, what would it cost? And by the way, that probably changes the setback. Like an overhead power line of any magnitude has got a span on it, and you've got to be a certain distance from that span. You bring that in and you put it underground, you're going to shroud it, concrete it, you're going to do various things to it. I'm not a hydro expert, but I want to find out if it can be done and how much it costs before just selling it off piecemeal at a non-marketable lot price. So if you can assure me that that still can happen, then I'm prepared on the surplus idea to go ahead. If that's all we're dealing with here with tonight, I'm prepared to get that ball rolling, but I'm not prepared to say that the ones they say can't be done are that way at this stage without us getting a third party involved.
Mr. Cotton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno and to Councillor, yes, this is just declaring the property surplus. There will be further investigations. I have contacted a company just to try, as you say, and it's a term that I use, trust but verify. So we have made contact with them. They are looking at it right now. We should have those numbers back, and once we have those numbers back, that'll help frame how we want to bring these forward, properties forward for future dispersal.
Thank you.
If at all,
Yes, that takes care of the direction for you and Councillor Baggio on this then. Perfect, thanks. Councillor Wells.
One more question through your worship, and I should have asked this when Chief Lawson was in, but it's in regards to the encroachments and how we deal with encroachments on city property. What is the normal process when we become aware of an encroachment? Because over the last couple of council meetings, we've seen properties city properties that have been encroached upon, and now we have to address it. I was just wondering what the normal process was. If Scott can answer that, that'd be great.
CAO Louis?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Wells, and I do apologize for those who aren't aware, firefighter training is on Tuesday nights, and usually when the fire chief has completed his section of staff reports, we let him go to training. As you know, I know you know, but I want the public to know. We didn't know that these questions would come up. So encroachments are generally handled in one of two ways, and I can't tell you what the trigger point is, but one of the ways is to remove the encroachment immediately. So imagine a fence, or upon the city becoming aware, I should say, a fence that's over the property line, or something that, where a park abuts private property. We've seen where a person has their garden or their bench or their tree or something over the line. And those are asked, we asked the offending, I guess, property owner to remove the encroachment. If it's a permanent structure, or especially a permanent structure of an historic nature, a break wall, for example, that encroaches onto a road allowance, we usually enter into an encroachment agreement with the owner of the property, which is a contractual obligation that sort of allows the encroachment to stay but removes some liability from the city. An interesting thing, and I'm always reluctant to talk about insurance sitting where I sit, next to my neighbor at council, but we require the person or the owner to have insurance that indemnifies the city or protects the city as a third party, I guess. Maybe should I stop? And apparently it's very,
You haven't
very
stepped over your boundary yet.
It's very hard to get lately. So some people, a condition of the encroachment agreement is that they maintain that insurance policy that names us as a third party insured, third party insured, and that's more and more difficult to get from the insurance companies, and it's one of the reasons that folks are having a hard time getting these encroachment agreements signed with the city. So that's the long answer to your question about the two ways we handle them.
It's called additional insured.
Additional insured party.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor, okay, thanks. Councilor Beauregard?
Through your worship to Mr. Cotton. I noticed, so all lands are going to require a phase 1 or phase 2 ESA. Who's on the hook for that? Is it the purchaser or would it be the city?
Mr. Cotton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Beauregard. Traditionally, we do ESA 1, and we actually have done ESA 1s on all these properties. ESA 2s would be if anyone purchased it, it would be on the purchaser to take care of the ESA 2, and that would be identified as part of our sales that, hey, you're going to have to do an ESA 2. We would make that known to them prior to purchase. We could do the ESA 2s and just add it to the price if need be, but that's how we traditionally have handled it.
Okay. I suppose my concern is that if we were to do a phase 2 and then it's required that remediation's required and then nobody wants to purchase that land anymore, then we're stuck with that bill. So I want to make sure we sort of avoid anything like that and make it clear to the purchaser what they're getting into based on the phase 1 or assessment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Beauregard, I will mention if these are ESA 2s that are required, then we also have a CIP program through our brownfield that does help would help the purchaser to cover some of those costs as well.
Okay. Okay. Councilor Bruno?
Mayor, through you to Bram, I'm wondering if in your research going forward, you can also sort this out. If we have a hydro easement on that land and we're selling it, we're going to sell it, I'm assuming, easement included? Because here's where I'm going with this. If there's a setback and somebody only wants 40 feet and it's 66 feet because the pole line's there, so now we're stuck with 22 feet and the maintenance. Or who is going to maintain it? Like if you're going to not take the whole bit of land, by default that means we're taking some land. And some land is still left with mowing, liability, yada, yada, yada. We need to sort that out so that if we're selling, we're out of the equation. They can use 40 feet of the 66, but they're going to own the 66, if that's possible. But again, I think that needs a background study.
Thank you, Councilor Costanza.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council, yes, that will be part of our ongoing research and information as we move forward. We'll be looking into that.
Awesome. Perfect. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Good job. Our staff in the region has been diligently waiting for this next report. Item 8.4, MOU between Port Colborne and Niagara Regional Housing. And the recommendation is that Chief Administrative Office Report 2022-219 be received. that council approve a memorandum of understanding between the City of Port Colborne and Niagara Regional Housing for an affordable housing development, and that a bylaw to enter into an MOU with NRH be brought forward, and that council authorize the mayor and acting clerk to execute the MOU and bylaw. If I could have Councillors Bruno and Danch get this on the floor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Just on this, I know we talked about this in the last meeting. I would just like to, there's someone here from the region?
Yes.
Okay. What we're hoping for in this, obviously, is to get this developed. But I would like to see it in a shorter time frame, or at least that you've made progress in that. I'm fully cognizant of the fact that you have other priorities in Niagara, you have other lands in play, and you have other lands that need work to get them to the stage of development. I know you probably understand that we don't want land banking and this to go on forever, but, you know, I would rather see if you can do that in 2 years, and we could also talk about going forward. I don't think there's anybody here that is not supportive of doing this. It makes total and complete sense. But I think that at the end of the day, it's the action that you're able to take that show us you're serious. You just saw a debate here about land sales. We've been very successful with it. It's money we're not taking off of property taxes. It builds a new house, puts in a new water meter, does some assessment. We don't want to be hanging around. And so I would like to know if you could deal with 2 years from your perspective to show substantive progress. Certainly if I'm here, and I'm sure others, we would not cut you off at the knees and change course on it. So I don't know if you're able to answer that. And I did have a second question that might be for Mr. Long. I could ask it now.
I'll wait on that, Councillor. So we're going to allow Mr. Long to invite our friends from the region up to help answer that question, but I'll let you take that away.
Okay, through you, Your Worship, I guess with Council's permission, I'd like to call up and recognize Donna Washishin, who is the CEO of Niagara Regional Housing. I also wanted to acknowledge Jeff St. Clair, who's a senior manager with NRH, and of course we want to recognize Regional Councillor Barb Butters, who is the board's vice chair.
Through you, Mayor. That's a really good question. 2 years could be kind of tough. We have to apply, we don't have the money to just go out and build. So we have to have the land ready and be able to submit proposals when funding opportunities come along. In recent years, a lot of these funding proposals have been fast and furious. Sometimes we only have a 2 or 3 week turnaround to submit a project that has to be shovel ready and everything already done. And in order to do that, we have to own the land. We can't submit a project without owning the land, so that's why hence we want to take ownership faster. But we're going to put our best efforts into getting it done. We just completed a master plan in the region, and you know, a lot of our properties are really good for redevelopment, but we have to be able to increase the density on each of the properties in different ways. So we have to work on a whole plan going forward. We're in the process of hiring somebody to go through that plan. While we're working through this plan, we'll then have a property where we can start applying for the funding. So we're going to put every effort into finding a funding opportunity. If not, then we can try to put it through on our 2024 budget process. And so that's why I would probably think 3 years is pretty reasonable. We should be well on our way within the 3 years.
So Councillor, just further that, only because at our last Niagara Regional meeting, a couple of senior staff came up to me that are involved with this. They're excited about this project for Port Colborne in the South End. And, you know, they want this to happen as soon as possible. But as you see, there are certain constraints based on federal provincial dollars coming down in the programs. But I think I understand what you're saying, that that as long as we can have Niagara Regional Housing keep coming back to us, or just coming back to Gary with Mr. Long, with updated reports on where they are in the process, will that alleviate any concerns that you may have?
It will.
Your mic?
Yes, and so I don't know whether I just had one other question, but it probably doesn't go to the Niagara Regional Housing.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, Councillor Bruno to Mr. Long.
Yeah, maybe to Mr. Long or maybe to Mr. Bowles. One of the things when we, I think we need a policy on when we sell public lands for development, and particularly if we're selling it to another level of government. I don't know that in any of our processes we have a clause that speaks to, whilst it may seem unlikely today, probably things 20 years ago that seemed unlikely are more likely than one would think. If the Niagara region were ever wanting to sell that, change the use, that built in the agreement is the city would be able to buy it back for $1. So in other words, I want to ensure that it stays what this intention is, and it's never sold for profit, or a government 15 years from now says, well, we're going to sell this all to the private sector, or you know what, we're going to sell it and we're going to consolidate all these 10 and 15 units in Welland and build a 50-unit tower and take away 5 12-unit things, and we're still going to turn back to the public 60 units of low-income housing or regional housing. I think we want to build in protections on anything we sold, that it stays in port and it's used in port and it's used for the purpose for which we sell it. You want to do otherwise, that's not in the original deals. So I don't know if, only because I know Mr. Bowles has worked with the university and other lands, if he could comment on that, or if Mr. Long could comment on that.
Start with Mr. Long, then we'll go to Mr. Bowles. Mr. Long?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. I am aware of Mr. Bowles' views on that, and I have had a conversation with Niagara Regional Housing's CEO about the scenario that you've presented. She assured me that Niagara Regional Housing is in this for the long haul, to use her words. They're not in the business of building and divesting of properties. But I think, as you allude to, councillor, things happen in life, things change in business. Maybe 15 years from now, it's a different conversation. And so for that reason, I think to your point, it's in the city's best interests to include some wording in a purchase agreement to describe that scenario and to protect the city's interests. I know in speaking with the regional housing CEO, it's important to her, as it is important to our city, that whatever happens to that property, that building, that it be used for public benefit, that it be used for public housing, affordable housing, whether we own it, whether they own and manage it, or whether some other not-for-profit organization manages and owns it, that it always be used for affordable housing. So we can build that wording into an agreement. I think the Housing Authority would be supportive of that.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bowles, anything to add? Thank you. Good. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I agree with Councillor Bruno 100%. I think the taxpayers at Port Colborne would expect us to be sure that their interests were protected to the nth degree, and I think this does that. So some kind of language that says we have the utmost trust in what Niagara Regional Housing will do with this property, and we're looking forward to having more affordable housing. We all know that we need that, without a doubt. But in order to, you're right. In 15 years, the conversation could certainly be changed. I mean, if we look back 30, 40 years ago, would we expect to have the hospital in the situation it is today? Not a chance. So, and that was a pretty big leap. So in that case, if some language could be included, I know I would appreciate it, and I know that Councillor Bruno's actually brought up the exact right point. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Long, you can take that as direction. Is that all right? Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Good job. I'll go to you. I'll go to you. Item 8.5 is the Downtown BIA Farmers Market Agreement Extension. Recommendation that Chief Administrative Office Economic Development Tourism Division Report 2022-221 be received. That Council approves the Downtown BIA Business Improvement Area managing the farmers market for 4 years, commencing with a new term of Council. The Council approved the updated Memorandum of Understanding Appendix A between the City and the Downtown BIA, attached as Appendix A to Report 2022-221, and that the bylaw authorizing entering into the MOU with the Downtown BIA be approved. And Madam Clerk, you have just a slight clarification on this?
Yes, through you, Mayor Steele. Just for the MOU, there will be a slight change to the farmer market hours from 8 a.m. to 12. It actually starts at 7 a.m.
Okay, from 7 to noon. Everybody understand that? Okay, if I could have Councilors Bruno and Bagu move that. Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Your Worship. Very quickly, I didn't have a chance to talk to the authors of the report, but I did mention it to Mr. Bowles here, Jesse Bowles, at the beginning of the meeting. It's my belief that we shouldn't have these type of agreements anniversarized with the term of council. So I would like to make an amendment that this be a 3-year agreement, and thereafter it can resume at 4 years, so that we are not dealing with extending, canceling, or anything at somebody exiting council who might not want it, or somebody entering council who is politicized. And I certainly, the BIA and the market doesn't strike me as one of those issues at all, but I think in an overarching way, we should look at our MOUs to at least anniversarize in the 3rd year at the latest of council. So if we did a 3-year, if that's agreeable to the BIA, certainly coming back after that would put the expiry of the MOUs always in the 2nd or 3rd year of a council.
Okay, I have no issue with that. Madam Clerk, comment on that? Having it go 3 years with then a 4-year renewal?
No, we'll just do an amendment to the motion.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'll just get this on the floor first. Is that all right? If I could have Councilors Bruno and Bagu move the amendment, is that fine to make it 3 and then with direction to go 4 years after that? Any comment on that, Mr. Bowles, with regards to going 3 and then 4?
We're in agreement. I had a few words to say, but if you guys are good with it, then...
Okay, well, that's perfect. All right, you're all set. So there is an amendment on the floor. Questions to the amendment? All in favor? Carried. Any further questions? All in favor? That's carried. You're all set. Thanks. Perfect. Item 8.7. Vale Health and Wellness Center cooling tower and heat exchanger gasket replacement. Recommendation that Public Works Department Report 2022-231 be received. The Council approves $450,000 to remove and replace the cooling tower and heat exchanger gaskets at the Valley Health and Wellness Center. The funding requirement of the $450,000 be included in the 2023 capital and related project budget. And the Council provide the Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Public Works signing authority to award the approved payment of assorted works. I have Councillor Wells and Bruno moving that. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Director Szapowski. Just for clarification, Steve, I know the title of the report identifies or gives a perception that this is a gasket exchange or a gasket replacement, but in reality, at $450,000, it's obviously much more than just changing the gaskets. So could you confirm that this is, so that everybody that's watching and listening and reads our minutes after the fact knows that this is more than just replacing some gaskets?
Mr. Szapowski.
Through your worship, Councillor Wells, you're exactly right. So there is actually a cooling tower that's on the roof of the Vale Center, and it's actually used to cool a lot of the mechanical aspects of the building, including some of the compressors, which actually regulate the ice. So without a fully functioning cooling tower, we risk the potential that the arena pads won't maintain the appropriate temperatures and we won't have ice. So what we are asking tonight is to have pre-approval for council to essentially approve the coming capital budget request that will come forward for this. And the reasoning behind that is to try to get a couple months ahead of the game, because there is a 4 to 6 month delay in actually ordering it, and then probably about a month delay in actually installing it. So we want to make sure we have it in time that we can do it in our somewhat of an off season. I know there's never really an off season, but it's the lesser of the two evils to do it during the summertime.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. Yeah, now it's clear that it's not just exchanging. We're actually replacing the cooling tower and the heat exchanger, and we'll have new ones there, and no problem keeping that ice frozen.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you. Through you to the director. Steve, I'm just wondering, I know this is a pre-budget approval and you've got to have a number, but so will this come back, or will it be like this business case study of, are there, cooling tower heat exchanger level 1, 2, this is more energy efficient, right? If you buy this one, right, you get, we save 60,000 over 3 years on utilities or whatever. I'd just like to know that all of that, it's not necessarily just this is the model. Like, is there in that procurement all that stuff looked at, various models and things?
Yep, through your worship to Councillor Bruno. So already to date, we've actually looked at different ways that we could be more efficient. The cooling towers are typically sized for the mechanics that are being run on them. In some aspects, we're actually looking to take items off of the cooling tower and reutilize the heat that they're providing. So that's where we're kind of looking at the efficiencies from that standpoint.
Super, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beauregard?
Through your worship to Mr. Shapowski, the prices that we're given, did that come from one entity, from Simco or Simco, or did we look at other potential quotations, or?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Beauregard. That is one quote that we did receive from our maintenance supplier right now, which is Simco. Upon approval tonight, we will be looking at other entities too to see if there is better competitive pricing.
It is a Simco product originally, the whole ice system, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Councillor Danch?
Yeah, through you, I just wondering, so it's a 10-year-old building, $450,000. Are we looking 10 years down the road again and it's going to be $600,000? I know things don't last, but this is a huge chunk of change.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Danch, this is something that we will be budgeting again for in 2033, and there are many aspects to do with this arena that are extensively costly. There's also compressors, there's water heaters, there's a lot of components to these facilities, and it is the cost of running those facilities.
So if I want to go and buy a new pair of skates, I'll probably be good for another 10 years then?
20 the way you skate. We don't wear them out anymore like we used to, Frank. CO's got a bit of clarification on this.
Sure, just through your worship to council, and I'm reiterating what's already in the report, but I was asked by a council member to make sure that council and the public is aware this is money that's already budgeted, it's in the capital spending plan. We're just asking to go out and take what's going to be a long tendering process and start it before the 2023 budget is approved, so that we can make sure that there's no interruption in service or disruption in service. So this is part of an ongoing maintenance plan, and I just wanted to make sure that that's clarified for the purposes of the decision, as well as those who are watching council make the decision.
Okay, further questions? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay, on to correspondence items that were brought forward. First item is a letter from Stephen Golke. Am I right? Was that correct, Stephen? Thanks. Who's a resident, and recommendation to improve safety in Port Colborne on the Clally Street East corridor and restricting heavy truck traffic. I'll have Councillor Wells put that on the floor. Couple Comments, questions, Councillor?
My question would go out to, and I don't know if any, or maybe Mr. Director Szapowski could answer it, can you foresee any issues with declaring at least that a portion of Clally Street non-heavy traffic? Can you maybe give some comments as to what impacts that would have on any of the area? Because I don't see any businesses over there that could not survive without having the access to Clally Street East. Okay?
Mr. Szapowski?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Wells. There are a number of businesses within the area that does have extensive trucking operations in the area. They more than likely are able to use Main Street, but there could be issues with turning radiuses and different issues there. So it would probably be wise of the city to reach out to a lot of those operations to see if there are constraints out there. There is the potential that we could move that to a heavy truck restricted roadway. And basically because it is residential and there aren't any aspects that would prevent us from doing that, and there are alternative routes. So it is a potential, but I would recommend that staff do investigate it further and reach out to the companies that actually operate trucking operations in the area.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
So Councillor, to get something on the floor here, can we have you move that we move this letter to staff to come back to council? It'll obviously be the new council with recommendations for Clally Street. If I could have Councillor Desmarais second that. And also in that, Stephen, can you also add the community safety zone in front of St. Therese? With the region's new implementation of community safety zones on regional roads, now that they've got everything in order, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here in Port Colborne. If we could also look at including a community safety zone. Schools are automatically included, we don't have to prove anything. We can add that, and there's a different set of fines and things like that. But if we include that also in this, and any other areas along that area. I mean, I don't know if technically the DeWitt, Carter, and Lakeshore areas are actually school zones, even though we have crossing guards. If they're not, then it's a different ball of wax to make it a community safety zone. It's not to say we can't do it, but it's a longer process where schools are already included. So if we could include that in that report coming back. Is that all right, Councillor? Thanks. Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm really actually pleased that we're going to be dealing with it in this way. The idea of Lakeshore and DeWitt being school zones is something that we should be looking at and making sure that is the case, because at this point I don't believe they actually are. So that should be addressed. But the whole traffic safety issue keeps rising and rising, and trucks figure prominently in this. And I think of Chippewa Road for certainly one example, but the Clally Street East is brutal. It truly is. But I'm wondering if we're looking at how we're going to do things to calm that situation for the future. Could we also include the projected changes that we're seeing for those areas? Because there's a lot of housing development expected in there. That should have a significant impact on what's going on, and possibly bring forward some other routes. Some other entrance routes, some other ways to travel through the community. So if we could also forecast that, because otherwise you'd end up redoing this later on. So let's do it all in one fell swoop and get it done.
You're correct, Councillor. And Steve, with regards to the Augustine property and Elite Homes moving in there, they're going to have to do a whole traffic study for that neighborhood also too. Yeah. So that'll bring forward a lot of recommendations on the planning side of life that we'll have to look at that time. So obviously that'll be included when they come forward.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Questions on the motion that's on the floor? Councilor Borger.
Through your worship to Mr. Szapowski, what I'm hearing, we always have the discussion about traffic and transportation, and we always deal with them almost as they come to us item by item. I think that we as a council should maybe implement a transportation master plan of some sort, maybe in the future, something like that, because I know the city of St. Catharines has that, and it could really help us and the municipality in how we decide to move forward and address these type of concerns. So I'm not sure if you have any comments on that, or if there's anything that we can do.
Mr. Szapowski?
Through your worship, I think that is definitely worth looking into now that we have our infrastructure needs study coming to a close in the near future. I think it's something we can piggyback off of now that we have the information and the daily traffic counts on the roadways too. So we could get to that stage.
So with that, Councillor, may I suggest we put that as direction to the CAO with regards to the new council being going through the extended strategic planning? Is that all right?
Sure.
Is that all right? Okay, good. Further questions? No? Anybody else? So on that motion, all in favor? That's carried. So hopefully that'll come back first quarter of the new year, Stephen? Probably? So, okay, good. Next is item 9.2, the Canadian Federation of University Women, Welland District, Unite to End Violence Against Women and Girls Orange Campaign. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, actually, I thought there was going to be a proclamation included with this, but there doesn't appear to be one. In any case, this is something that the city certainly took notice of last year, and we did do a flag raising and photo ops. And at the time last year that we did speak about it in council, and certainly with some of the staff members, as to the idea of lighting the cupola on City Hall in different colors. And I know we have done some colored lighting in the past year. So what I would ask is could we look at this and see if we could light it in orange for the 16 days of action. They're 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, especially in light of the fact that gender-based violence has increased, I think almost, I won't get the exact percentage, but more than 50% through the time of COVID. It's gotten to be a major problem in the city of Port Colborne as well, where we're seeing more and more families split, and this is part of that whole stress points that families are feeling. In any case, I would like us to pay particular attention to it in this year, and light it in orange. Do what we can. We've also talked in the past about lighting King George Park. In this case, I think it was put to me by this the University Canadian Federation of University Women representatives that they really like the idea of lighting the cupola because the cupola is the lighthouse for the city, and they thought that it provided a guiding light. So I think that is not, it couldn't have been said better. If we could light it in orange, I would very much appreciate that. That's my request.
Okay, Councillor, I'm going to have you move, and if Councillor Kalalev can second, that we support the Canadian Federation of University Women Unite to End Violence Against Women and Girls Orange campaign, and that we direct the CAO to have the cupola lighted in orange for the 16 days of activism.
Thank you.
You all right?
Yes.
Questions on that? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor. Item 9.6 is a resolution from Brighton, Ontario. Apologize. I was looking for the top. It's not there. I've asked that if I could have councillors Kalalev and Beauregard move that we support this. So I guess I got to pass the gavel, technically. So who's the deputy mayor?
You're the deputy mayor right now? Yes.
Okay, so I can't use, so if I could have Councillor Desmarais move, with Councillor Beauregard seconding it. I've passed the gavel to the deputy mayor that we support Brighton, and I'll just read what they've asked for here. Whereas attracting primary health care providers, including doctors, in their case to Brighton, but this would be Port Colborne, and other small communities has been a difficult task. And whereas the provincial government announced a tuition program to attract nurses to underserved areas of Ontario. Now be resolved that the municipality of Brighton Council requests that the Government of Ontario provide funding and change legislation to allow the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario to implement the changes proposed in their letter to the Minister of Health on August 18th of 2022, which includes exempting IEPs from the regulatory requirements to have Canadian experience and redo their residency, where all other requirements are met, and implementing practice-ready assessment programs similar to those already used in 7 other provinces. And further, the Government of Ontario develop a similar tuition program to attract family doctors to underserviced areas of Ontario. And further, the motion be circulated to the Premier, the Minister of Health, David Piccini, and other municipalities across Ontario and the Association of Municipalities, AMO, for endorsement. So I'm asking Council to support that. Deputy Mayor.
No, I don't. Thank you.
You want to ask that question?
Oh, I have to ask that because you've put it forward. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Apologies. Okay, any questions or comments from anyone? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. That's the first time I got to do it, and I'm finished.
Thank you, Councillor Cleland. I appreciate that. So, Madam Clerk, you'll get that out and I could sign that. So, thank you. Okay, item 9.9, Township of McGarry, removal of municipal councillors under prescribed circumstances. I have Councillor Desmarais wanting to speak to this. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. This motion actually comes at a very good time. I had circulated a notice of motion earlier this year with respect to the removal of elected officials from municipal councils, and decided to put it aside and let it stand down until because I heard that there are other motions coming forward from other municipalities. This is the one that actually has come forward and made the best sense, and basically it supports the idea of the province entering into some kind of resolution on removing people from office. We've seen some terrible, terrible behavior from elected officials in this province, well, actually around the world, but in this province is the one I'm going to focus on right now, in this past few years. And, you know, these are offices that people put us into because they want us to do a job for them. We are public servants. We're not here to behave in those horribly disrespectful manners and just make an absolute mess of the whole thing. It makes me absolutely crazy because I have great respect for this position and for the positions of these seats around the province. I do believe that when a person abuses their office in that manner, they need to be removed. Right now, there is no mechanism for removal. So this motion asks that this be handed, the whole question be taken over to the Municipal Affairs and Housing Ministry and also be sent to AMO. And we ask that the merits of allowing the recall of municipal councillors under carefully prescribed circumstances, including displays of hatred, misogyny, and all forms of discrimination, and it be facilitate strengthened and ongoing orientation and training for councils and local boards and committees. I just think that this is such an important piece, and it belongs with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, but we need to send them that very clear and strong message that we are asking for this. If you want to improve the way that government is, the light in which government is seen for the future, this has to be done. It's absolutely essential. So I ask that I get your support for this. Thank you.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Beauregard. Questions or comments? Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if it's a technicality, but when it says municipal councillors, what about regional councillors? Are they considered a municipal councillor?
Yes.
In the big picture, I guess you call it?
Yeah, it's under the Municipal Act, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good. I'm glad they included included local boards and committees, because we've had some actions across the province with some of those, which weren't good. Further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Wow, okay. We are, there are no motions this evening. Are there any notices of motion? Any notices of motion? Seeing none. We have minutes of boards, committees, commissions. We have the, I'm going to do these in block, guys. Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes of March the 1st, 2022. The Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of May 31st, 2022. Port Colborne Library Board minutes of July 20, 2022. Port Colborne Historical Marine Museum minutes, July 19, 2022. Port Colborne Senior Advisory Council minutes of July 19, 2022. If I could have Councillors Wells and Bodner move those. Are there any questions on any of those minutes? All in favor? It's carried. Bylaws, we have bylaws 20.1, 20.2, 20.3, and 20.4. If I could have Councillors Danch and Bruno move the bylaws. Are there any questions? All in favor? That's carried. This time, if I could have Councillors Klaloff and Bagu move that Council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. Item 21.1, minutes of the closed session portion of the September 13th, 2022 Council meeting. Item 21.2, Chief Administrative Office Report 2022-226 pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. 21.3, Chief Administrative Office Report 2022-223 pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. 21.4, Chief Administrative Office Report 2022-227 pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. 21.5, Chief Administrative Office Report 2022-15 concerning a human resources update pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, subsection 2392D, labor relations or employee negotiations. 21.6, Corporate Services Department verbal report concerning the performance review and goals of the CAO pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Questions? All in favor? Yeah, I had Councillors Klaloff and Bagu.